I'm the son of a Holocaust survivor. My father was hiding in Holland during World War II
Oh my gosh.
with his youngest brother. The oldest brother actually joined the English army or the military. I'm not sure if it was the army, but the military. And then the oldest, well, actually, that was second oldest. The oldest one was actually involved in the underground movement to get people out of Germany, get them into safe houses.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hands on Logos podcast. This is where we discuss current events, personal growth, and any other random topic that crosses our minds. Our goal is to have a meaningful discussion that help us to see the topics we discuss more clearly. Our hope is we can help you expand your self-awareness, develop your critical thinking, and learn to be less reactive to the world around you. And most importantly, remember, be curious. If you like what you hear, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. We appreciate you. Oh my gosh, this is episode number 27 of the show.
27? 27?
21. 21.
Okay.
We were talking about numbers don't mean anything anyways, just before we came on.
I think you went forward in time there a couple of weeks.
Exactly. 21, 27, it's all just a construct, right?
Yeah, it's all just it's all in my mind anyway, so.
Exactly. 27. It's like basically it's close to one. It's just if you just remove that little top part, if you just erase that, you know.
Yeah, I guess.
I suppose. So what do we? Okay. So anyways, what are we talking about today, Chris?
You know, we got some stuff left over from last week, although it's a little dated. And then of course anything else that comes to mind. You know, today in Toastmasters we talked about quirks. Which I thought was an interesting topic, and we had a lot of guests come today. That was pretty.
A lot of guests, too. Yeah, and it's interesting. And so we got a little treat for everybody out there. Some of you definitely think we're screwed up. We've been reading comments. Thanks for the comments. We appreciate. Listen, I'll take any comment, even if you think we're idiots, which several of you do think we're idiots. So keep watching. We won't disappoint you.
And I'm not going to disagree that I'm an idiot.
So, anyways,
I'm just a better idiot than you are. That's all.
Yeah, you're just a smarter idiot. Yeah, exactly. There we go. But we got a special guest coming on today. Actually, another Toastmasters friend. And
who's coming
on? Andrew coming on.
Oh, Andrew, that's all right. Yeah,
Andrew,
cool. That'd be great.
In just a few minutes, actually, right? He said he'd be on about 30 minutes past the hour.
I hope so, yeah.
And I'm going to get some therapy today. So, which is kind of cool. So we're going to get real-time therapy. Maybe I can get myself straightened out a little bit.
Okay. Well, you can try.
Yeah, we'll try. Hey, you know, Chris, everybody gets to start somewhere. So apparently what the therapy is about is, I don't know if anybody knows it. I'm sure a lot of people know what Toastmasters is, but for one, we welcome anybody to come to our Toastmasters club. I think it would be good for almost anybody to come. But typically, there was a Toastmaster, and my job today was evaluate the overall meeting. And I think typically I'm a little bit, I'll call it harsh in my comments sometime. So I'm going to work on trying to be a little bit nicer. So that's what Andrew's going to come on and try to get me straightened out today.
Yeah, I would reframe what you said as you're very direct.
Yeah, direct, but on the if I remember the exact words she said, it was like I'm right at the very limit, you know, of things. So
well, again, so this goes to the whole idea of, you know, it is a safe environment, right? It's an environment where we feel comfortable giving negative feedback to people so that they can incorporate it to make a positive change in the way they speak.
Yeah.
Depending on where you're coming from as the listener, the receiver of that feedback, and, you know, depending on what you're used to, you may not realize just how safe an environment really is. So when someone gives you feedback, they're doing it from the perspective of really trying to get you the input you need to be a better speaker.
To be better.
And it's not about a judgment of, are you a good person? Are you a bad person? Are you a valuable person? None of that is part of this. It really is about your ability to deliver your message. And quite often your feedback that you receive is, I won't say it's irrelevant, but it's coming through the filter of the person who listens to it. I have people all the time because I don't like to use pictures and slides much. I prefer to communicate directly. I
Yeah.
don't use a lot of slides and pictures. I rarely do unless it's like an educational presentation. And so everyone says, "Oh, you could do this and you could add slides." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I want you to look at my face when I'm talking, not
Yeah.
at some picture over here." And so that's one of the things is I often get that as input and I take it for what it's worth. I mean, if it could be valuable and it might connect better with some people, but that's not
Yeah.
what I'm going for. So I've got
Yeah.
you got to take all the feedback in your own filter as to what you're trying to get done.
Yeah, and feedback is a challenging thing to take, and I'm getting much better at taking feedback. But it's typical that it could be common, especially like let's say for instance you did a speech and you did like the best you could. You worked for hours to prepare for it, and then somebody comes on and just starts giving you need to work on this and this and this and this and this. I mean, it can be a little tough to take sometimes. You're like, man, I gave it everything I've got, and obviously like you want a lot more, and you know that can hurt some.
And yet again, the filter you just listen to that through. Like I did all of this work,
Yeah,
and they
right.
don't recognize all the effort that I put into it. And now
Yeah,
they're criticizing something that they want me to do even more than I did because they're not even looking at how much effort you put into it. They're
right,
just
right.
saying, "Hey, here is some objective criteria that in my mind that I think you should work on." And
Yes.
so that filter you just heard it through,
Yeah.
that's the problem. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, and what I remember too when I was studying to be a photographer, there's this one particularly very skilled photographer, but very difficult. His name was Mark Halper, Mark Robert Halper. He was probably one of my best teachers. And I would argue against his critiques. And he's like, well, if you don't want me to critique it, I just won't give you any critiques. It's like, you know, it takes work to actually think through something valuable. And and I would say, well, but then I had this constraint, and I had this, and I had this. And he stopped me and said, look, I don't care about any of that. Basically, I'm just judging what you put in front of me, and I'm trying to tell you how to make it better. That's all I'm trying to do. And it took me a while. It took me a couple of years to kind of absorb that, you know, wisdom because
Well,
that's kind of a tough one.
I mean, if you think about it from the aspect of, let's say you have some disability, some physical disability, you're missing an arm, and you don't have a hand or something, and
Yeah,
you're trying to do something that requires the use of that missing item, right?
yeah,
So
right.
if someone gives you feedback that says, well, you need to be doing this and this and that and the other thing, they may be looking, they may not know you've got a disability, they may not care you've got a disability. They're saying you need to be able to perform at this level to get better. It's your job to overcome that obstacle and figure out a way around it. Or you could just say, you know what, I can't do that. That's a limitation I'm not going to be able to live up to. I've got to find another way around it, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
there's
definitely.
there's there's a variety of ways to view it, but if you view someone's feedback as personal against you,
Yeah,
that's the problem. It's not personal against you. It's objective against your
yeah,
performance.
yeah,
It's your outcome being judged objectively.
yeah. Now,
Now, actually,
yeah,
being
yeah,
judged objectively through their subjective lens. But
yeah.
that's
I'm judging you objectively through myself. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. But here's the thing, though. I think it is helpful, Chris, that you understand where the person is and their particular set of constraints. And if what you're asking them to do is 10 levels above their ability, I don't know how valuable that is. I mean, ideally, I would just want to have the perfect critique would be, I just want to move them I want them to stretch just a little bit, something that's possible for them to do, but something that's clearly like, how do you even
well,
expect me to
yeah.
do that? You know?
Like we were saying, when someone gives their very first speech in Toastmasters, you don't want to tear them apart. You're going to be
Oh my
much
gosh.
more
No.
positive, because this is their first time. We don't know what's going on. But after they've been doing it a while, you can be a little more harsh in your judgment. You can be a little more critical in your judgment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my other thought though is like you said, you want to meet them where they are. I have a problem with the idea of you did a good speech for someone with that problem. No, you did a good speech. It's just that you did a good speech. There is not for someone with your limitations.
Yeah.
That's not. I don't want to hear anyone say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because there's a certain amount of condensation in that, and the fact that you know with your ability you're like super good, you know, or I know I've gone to yoga class before, and I always get this comment. It's like, you know, for somebody your size, you're pretty flexible, right? What does that mean exactly? It's always you're pretty flexible, for someone your size, right?
Yeah. So the
Now, Mike,
disclaimer, I mean, I don't know why I just thought of how Trump always gets his little jabs in at people. He compliments them and then he undermines the compliment with a little side thing.
of course,
It's one of my daughter's teachers is is one of the performing arts teachers, does that all the time.
yeah,
She compliments the kids in their performance and then makes a little underlying jab about how they don't listen or something like that. It's like, you didn't need to say that. That was unnecessary for the conversation.
well, that makes sense actually, because when you're giving the critique or trying to help somebody, are you really trying to help them, or is it for you? And if it's anything to do with you, you got to erase that, right? Because that's not important.
But yeah, I mean, the idea here of feedback. I mean, you need to hear feedback. And I think the ultimate test is when you hear something that sounds so personal to you and you're able to partition it off in your mind to not go into the biological emotional reflex and to hear what's being said. The interesting thing is sometimes people will want to get a reaction out of you. They will be giving you basically insults in that feedback. And if you're still able to listen to that and parse the pieces that are really feedback, you can avoid getting pissed off with someone. So you can avoid rising to the temptation of acting the way they're trying to get you to act.
Yeah, that's so. I mean, giving good feedback is so challenging for me because I know, like our Toastmaster today, she clearly made a mistake multiple times in a row, and I wanted to point it out, but I was rushed in time, and I didn't want that. I didn't want to not say that because I think it was something very important for her to work on next time. But I was rushed because remember we were running late. And so I didn't take enough time to think through a way to say that in a more elegant way.
Yeah.
And one more thing, I didn't have the relationship that I have with many other Toastmasters as well either.
Yeah. Was it a couple of weeks ago when you were going into the Zoom background of one of the speakers, and the person you were giving it to, I mean, he was perfectly fine taking it, and listening to it, and it didn't bother him one bit, as far as an insult or anything like that. But others were surprised that you went to that level of specificity, right, in what you were talking about. But that was something I don't think people understand that. This goes back to my idea, like we talk about when you're on a team and you feel safe on a team, that whole psychological safety idea, right?
Yeah.
A team doesn't have to be, all rainbows and butterflies to be safe, right? You don't have to put baby protective things on all the corners to keep people from getting hurt.
Yeah.
You have locker rooms where people feel safe to act in a certain way that often feels very very non-nice, right? Very much ribbing each other, insulting each other, but it's a level of camaraderie that allows that safety, that you can still show certain types of vulnerability, you can still show certain types of weakness and still be considered part of the team and be okay with that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Because so you're basically saying that, look, I can beat the crap out of you, but if somebody else dares to do that, then we're in a fight, right? Because I'm not going to let anybody else talk to you like that.
My old boss would come in and complain to us about the job we were doing, how we could do better, blah, 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 blah. But if anyone outside the team gave anyone on her team flack, she was defending them against that person. It's like, this is my team. I will make them do better, but that's not your job.
Yeah, if you have a problem with my team, you come to me, right? And then
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That's so interesting. So I'm gonna think through that. I'm gonna get some therapy just coming up here in a couple of minutes, Chris, and then maybe I can give because
this is about 10 minutes. I just got a text from you. You said about 10 minutes.
Because here's what I want. I don't want that point to go across because our meeting was out of control for, in my opinion, 2 to 3 minutes when it didn't have to be out of control, and I just want to fix that problem, but I probably could have chosen better words to get my point across. But who knows? Maybe that was okay. Maybe she was temporarily just a tiny bit, because she said message received. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. And in some ways, that may have been more helpful for her long term. I don't know. It'd be nice to have her on the show and kind of talk about that. I'd be curious to learn.
Talk about Heidi?
Yeah.
She's an interesting person to talk to anyway. I mean, her life story is very interesting, and then her whole thing of helping people build their goals and through vision boarding and stuff. I mean, that's interesting too. So.
Oh yeah. We have so many, we have so many interesting people in Toastmasters. It's like everybody is like, I don't know how we get it. I don't know if it's our group and we have a certain dynamic and culture that would tend to kick out or reject people that doesn't want to grow, that doesn't want to do certain things, and it attracts us. I don't know. I just wonder if it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that will only get those very high quality people in. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, a lot of people cycle out after 3 to 6 months, right? Because there's a commitment of time. There's a commitment to be part of the group, to pay attention to the people in the group. I've noticed people who are just obsessed with growth from a business perspective, I mean, like getting better at their jobs or stuff, they tend to get tired after 6 months to a year, and they move on to something else.
Yeah.
They're staying on board and on task to be in there. I mean, Clement's been there 30 some odd years, right? And you think about, he's still doing this. I mean, his speaking's fine. It's not going to change drastically in the next couple of years, but what he's using it for is for networking and for mentorship and mentoring others and all of the other aspects of what you get out of that, right? I don't know how much business this Toastmasters leads to for him, but I think there's other factors that's fulfilling. Brian, who was our guest a couple of weeks ago, said it's the best mastermind group he belongs to.
Yeah,
he belongs to a lot of mastermind groups. So to me, that's a big compliment, because I know he belongs to several.
Yeah. Yeah. All I know is, like, I feel better when I go to Toastmasters. I really start looking forward to going to Toastmasters every Friday morning. It's like,
I think we've got the goal of Toastmasters is better public speaking and leadership. Those are the two main things that they focus on.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of other stuff you learn. There's a lot of other stuff you learn in that. It's like, how to take feedback properly without getting emotional. I mean, there's
how to do an evaluation. Right? I mean, I keep joking about I don't like the compliment sandwich. The compliment, then the feedback, and then the compliment.
That's very popular. I was reading an article the other day saying that is not the most effective technique, actually, to use.
No, but the idea is to get them started feeling nice, and then to get them ending feeling nice.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was thinking the other day about this specifically. You know how you mentioned Chris Voss and his talking to people, right?
Yeah.
Like I think he was talking to people who have to fire other people. And the idea when you have to fire someone, you bring them into the office and they know something's different, something's odd for that day because it's just not a normal scenario. And you start with a bunch of positive small talk and then you fire them.
Yeah.
That's just totally wrong. He's saying they know something's coming and now you're dragging it out and being cruel in essence. And you're not trying to be cruel, but that's how it comes across.
No, what you're trying to do is you're just trying to protect yourself more than the other person at that point.
Well, maybe even you are trying to make them feel good before you lay down the hammer on them or whatever. But regardless of that, if it would probably carry more weight if you said, "Hey, we got a tough conversation today," and you start with that, right? Yeah. So you lay the expectation. Okay, let them gird their loins, let them steel themselves up for that reaction.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think everybody may respond a little differently. So, I mean, you sort of have to probably read the tea leaves a little bit, I guess, in order to do that.
But that's just it. If you're a person who's always trying to be in a certain positive mindset, then something like the criticism you give being more direct might just not run well for them.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Andrew, here we are.
Hi. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good to see you, Andrew.
I see you too. Yeah, I texted Chris saying that I needed to walk the dog, so I hope that this is okay. But you get a little bit of an active participation here.
Nice. Sounds good. I like the sky. It's very good.
And I'll show you a little navel if you want to see.
Oh, there we go.
Here? Hey,
Yeah,
Mabel. Yeah. Yeah, I'm Mabel.
there we
Oh, she's a
go.
real
We
cutie.
love dogs. That is cool. That is so cool.
You-
Just like a quick marketing lesson.
Yep.
Anytime you can get a dog or a baby into whatever you're
Yep.
doing, that's a sure thing, man. Never go wrong with babies.
Absolutely.
Have you seen,
Absolutely.
in fact, I'm going to take a little thing. Have you seen Shark Tank? Do you watch a lot of Shark Tank episodes? Or I watch a bunch of them.
I haven't seen that many, but I've seen from time to time.
But I'll tell you, whenever a dog comes on, man, all the sharks just go nuts over the dog, and they love the dog. Like, you're like,
They've
oh,
done
hey,
studies to show
what were
that
you
the
here
ones
for
that
again?
bring dogs on have a higher percentage of getting a shark.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's so cool. So Andrew, are you still there? Oh, you're frozen.
I think he's frozen.
Uh oh. Well, Andrew, when you come back, we'd just if you could, if you can hear me, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but we'd love for you to talk about yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, maybe he'll be back.
there we go. He'll be back.
Anyway, so the other things we didn't get to talk to last week, right, which I thought was interesting. I wanted to talk about putting spin on things.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Right? And
Spin.
what got me thinking about this was when Doge and Trump got rid of a whole bunch of probationary federal workers in a variety of departments, and then they were required to bring them back because the court said they had to bring them back. And then I guess they're going to turn around and fire a lot of them again. I don't know exactly how that's working out, but what's the spin that you put on this? As from one side to the other, it's like, oh yeah, we're getting rid of. How do I say, I'm getting rid of the probationary people, right? Because in essence, when you think about it, the probationary people are the people that eventually become the experienced people. So you need a continual flow of people coming into a system and people leaving a system for the system to maintain functionality, right? So if you say we're going to cut off everyone who's been here under a year, under 2 years, whatever the number is, the probationary people, you're now going to have a huge gap that then that moves through the system over the years, and you're going to have to then kind of scramble to make sure there's enough people to fill in those gaps over time. So kind of how do you spin this idea of this is the way to go, instead of just doing an assessment of each individual and say this person is no good, let's get rid of them, this person's good, let's keep them. That would be the ideal way to do it. Obviously the efficiency wise that might not be the fastest way to do it, but that was the thought of how do you spin that conversation to kind of address that you're actually making a good long-term decision.
So when you're talking about spin, you mean in particular, how do you present information in a way that people make you think it's a good decision, right?
Yeah. How do you get people to accept or believe or in what you're doing, considering that almost everything has unintended consequences?
Unintended, which means there's consequences from your decision that you're not able to predict.
Well, or even if you're able to predict them, you're not going to second and third level. You're just saying first level. So we need to save money. We need to get rid of federal workers. Boom, I'm going to fire a bunch of federal workers. That's like the first order consequence. The second order consequence is just what I mentioned. You end up with a 2-year gap of no employees. So suddenly you've got this kind of gap year going through the system that needs to be accommodated for in the long term, right? And so that's going to impact the ability of the system to operate.
Well, it depends on what problem you're trying to solve. So for when Trump came in, he's not talking about how to optimize the government, how to do this. Basically, his problem is the government's wasteful. We need to drain the swamp. We're going to take a chainsaw and a hatchet at it. And everybody's like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so in essence,
sorry, yeah.
It feels like there's no goal of efficiency in what's happening right now. Right? We said that we want it to be efficient. There's this Department of Government Efficiency. All this stuff is the desire to, the government needs to do a better job. Right? The argument wasn't let's get rid of government. The idea was that the government needs to do a better job. But what seems to happen is like, let's just get rid of government piece by piece.
Well, that is the general consensus of, so if you take your standard Republican dude, right, or chick, their general thought is as a generality, I know you're going to attack me on the edges of this, but I'm looking just this core central thing. The general belief is the government is too big and it just needs to be trimmed back a little bit, right? So let's go trim it back. And that's how people want to hear. It's like typically most people don't want details. They just want to say, let the tree's going too big. Let's just start trimming it back a little bit. And the thing is if you believe that system, I would rather you over trim a little bit than under trim because it's just we don't like what's going on. So just get the chainsaw and start cutting limbs off. You know?
Yeah. So going back to the gardener analogy, which pruning is how you control the size and shape of the plant, right?
Yeah, right.
But if you over prune, you actually do damage that takes a long time to recover from.
Yeah,
so if I cut off one of the main branches of a tree, it will take me years for new branches to come in that will help to do the same thing that branch that I cut off did.
Yeah,
it's one thing to say I want to shape the tree, and I'm going to cut off some little branches here. I'm going to trim a little bit there. It's another thing to just hew entire chunks of it off and expect for it to still be the same tree that it was before, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but if you're catering to a base, they're not interested in highly nuanced things. They're like, this tree's out of control. Freaking just cut some shit off. Sorry, I'm not supposed to cuss anymore. You know.
Yeah. Well, as far as nuance goes, nuance is tough. Yeah. But nuance is where we're trying to get people to, right? Because the nuance is where your critical thinking comes into play.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
If I just appeal to the brunt basic idea that someone has in their mind, then there's no critical thinking involved.
Right.
Because emotion is what's driving a lot of that. Emotion, government's too big and waste money. It's an emotional appeal. So basically, anything you do to hurt the government and save money, I'm all for. That's emotion. That has nothing else to do with it.
That's emotion.
And we're trying to avoid that. That's part of why we're here, right? Is on the channel is to have that conversation.
Now we're trying to do that, but they know for a fact, like Trump knew for a fact that he needs to cater to his base, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what he has to do immediately is start showing that stuff's getting done. Like day one, we're starting to change, we're starting to cut, and we're starting to trim, right, to show some progress quickly. And
yeah, but I again, so and then you have to spin everything, right? So like when Doge says something like, "Oh, we found this program that's spending too much money, and we cut it, and we saved $800 million or whatever the dollar amount is," right? Yeah. And then of course, when you actually get the nuanced details of it, you find out that program was approved for $1 billion. Only ever spent $200 million, and the other $800 million, even though they were approved to spend it, wasn't actually on anyone's radar to spend because it was part of an approval. So you didn't save $800 million. You just took $800 million potential debt off of there. But there's no debt there. There's no spend there. So how do I spin that? I spin that as I saved $800 million, and all you did was cut off a line item that was a potential risk, but it wasn't actually spent.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's right. Because you're in that particular case, if you want to appeal to the masses, you don't need nuance. In fact, people are not going to understand nuance. They just want big, sweeping moves, right?
Well, yeah. So it seems to me like what you want is dumb people who can be swayed by their emotions, because the level of effort it's going to take you to bring someone's knowledge level high enough to understand the nuance, you don't want to spend the time doing that.
Right. Because it's too difficult, it's too hard, too much thought, too much of everything. So this goes down, okay. So this goes down, like if you read The Republic, it's written by Plato a couple thousand years ago. They did not like the concept of democracy at all. They thought that was a very scary proposition. And so basically what they attributed to democracy to is equal to mob rule. And, right? And so there's some truth to that. Because the problem is when you get a large group of people together, you truly start getting into this mob rule sort of mentality where it's mostly emotion, and where emotion goes up and thinking goes down. And, and you can build some very compelling arguments, and you can end up with some outcomes that are really bad based upon this mob rule concept. So you got to be careful with that.
Yep, Andrew's back.
I am back. I apologize, everybody.
No worries.
Apologize.
No problem, Andrew.
We're talking about politics and mob rule and appealing to the masses and not using critical thinking and understanding the nuance of situations, right? So Yeah,
A
and
light
Scott.
subject like that, right?
Oh yeah, light subject. Yeah, simple Friday afternoon topic.
Simple
But
Friday
Scott, the
banter.
one thing I was thinking of is several science fiction stories, even like when you think about old Rome, right? Citizens were the ones who could vote, and not everyone was a citizen.
Yeah,
So
right.
I remember in one of the, gosh, who's the 50th guy who wrote Starship Troopers? Was that Heinlein? I believe it was.
Robert
And
Hyman.
in his storyline, to have the right to vote, to be a citizen in that one, you had to join the military and be in the military, and then
Yeah.
you had to be a military vet. So the idea is you put up you risked your life for your society, therefore you have the right to vote for your society.
Yes.
I think that if you had requirements like that, I don't mean that's that specific one, but requirements that actually showed that the person was invested in the society that they're voting for, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh,
So
Well, it does to me because it shows you have a little skin in the game, which means you're going to
exactly.
probably think a little bit more about your decision before you make. But Chris, hang on, let's put that on pause for a second.
Sure.
Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's get you to introduce yourself, Andrew. Tell us just a little bit about your background.
Okay, a little bit about my background. Well, I was born in California, born at UCLA
Well,
Hospital, actually. But then I became a Trojan twice over. I went to graduate school for an MBA and then also went for a master's in social work. So, but between those times, I grew up in Thousand Oaks. I'm the son of a Holocaust survivor. My father was hiding in Holland during World War II
oh my gosh.
with his youngest brother. The oldest brother actually joined the English army or the military. I'm not sure if it was the army, but the military. And then the oldest, well, actually, that was second oldest. The oldest one was actually involved in the underground movement to get people out of Germany, get them into safe houses. And so, in fact, he wrote a really interesting autobiography about that. It was like something like The Woods or something like that. In fact, I think there was a movie very similar to that account. Anyway, so my dad is is a Holocaust survivor. He didn't go to the camps, but was hiding and was in charge of basically protecting his youngest brother and another boy in a house in this what was considered a safe house, and luckily was a safe house, which was like a country inn, and the Gestapo would actually stay there. And so they'd be on either side of his room at times, and he was in a room. He had to pull out the bed. There was a hole in the back of the backboard of the bed. He would hide there with the his youngest brother, and then this other kid. And I understand this other kid was very rambunctious, and so he had to really, keep him in check. And he was maybe like 12, 13, my father at the time. So it was
Oh my
a lot of
God.
responsibility on him. And so basically, the bed would be pulled out. He would go in there with the other two, pull back the bed. And I never did find out if the Gestapo actually literally went into that room. That would really been scary. Anyway, so my father uh, was a Holocaust survivor. My mom went to the United States before the war with her sister, and her parents were going all over the place in Europe. They were in France. My mom was born in France, but they went in different locations, basically by rail, just trying to hide from the Gestapo, and several times were almost caught. And so amazing on both sides of the family, just how World War II really impacted our family, and frankly, how I might not be even here today if it wasn't for the goodness of people to hide my father, because actually his parents were right across the street at another supposedly safe house that did not turn out to be safe, and they were, I believe, executed right there, right in front of the house. So it was, yeah, pretty close call for my father and his brother. So anyway, so that's my upbringing. So I grew up in a household where, um, survival techniques and being a survivor was a big deal. And so I grew up in Thousand Oaks. I have an older sister. She's married and has two kids of her own, and one of the kids just had a child. The other, um, and the other one, he works in the mental health world. And I got married about 13 years ago or so, and I moved from I went from Los Angeles down to Orange County and live in Irvine with her, and she has three kids. The oldest one is getting married, and she lives in Spain. Well, she lives in New York right now, but has been living in Spain. Will be getting married later on this year. The middle one lives very close to us. She's a doctorate in occupational therapy, and the youngest one is going to school at University of Cincinnati in industrial design. So, so that's a bit of a background. I'm currently a social worker at the Department of State Hospitals, and I've been there for over 17 years. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And before I got into this career, for over 20 years, I worked for the city of Los Angeles as a civil engineer, and I was a licensed civil engineer with the city. So and I went to school at UC Berkeley for my undergraduate degree in civil engineering.
I want to bring up Chris, because Chris and I were just talking about this concept of mob rule.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's an example of mob rule, tons of emotion, very little thought, basically saying that this guy Hitler said, basically, those people over there are your whole problem. And so the solution is to kill them all.
Exactly.
I mean, whenever you start to hear even anything like that, man, everybody should be like, their little red flag should be going up, right? When you start to group, every single person in that group is the problem. They need to die.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you should be like, wait a minute, man, hang on just a second,
Oh, absolutely.
We got to think through this a little bit.
Yeah, I think
and it's crazy that happened. That is so crazy. And it can happen again is the thing.
Sure.
I think we think in our mind that, that would never happen again. And I'm like, I'm not so sure.
So one thought that I had, Andrew, as you were talking about, both how your family was affected by World War II, is that, we've had 70 some odd years without what I'll call big wars. I mean, there were wars along the way. There were police actions, whatever you want to call them, along the way. But the idea of big countries fighting each other, kind of no one thought about for a long, long time. After the Cold War, it was kind of like, there will be no more big wars between big countries, right? And then Ukraine happened, right? I'd say the first one where they went into Crimea should have been a wake-up call for everyone, but you ended up with, what happened in what's going on right now with Ukraine. And I'm like, I'm not sure people understand what that means from what it could do to the world aspect, right? I mean, if you think about World War II, there wasn't any place on Earth that wasn't impacted by World War II, right?
Yeah.
So if this changes in any way or gets bigger in any way, this is potentially something where, we do air raid tests at schools for people to get under their desks or whatever, or the duck and cover kind of thing.
Sure.
I mean, conceptually, the idea of rationing food supplies, I mean, these are things that we haven't had to worry about. But what could happen with what's going on in the world? It's just we're reliving an age that was 2 generations ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very scary. Yeah. I think that World War II is such an example of what not to do, or certain signs like you're saying, Scott, that my goodness, the signs of Hitler, basically trying to say, hey, this group is the cause of our problems, and this group needs to be eliminated, really is reminiscent, unfortunately, with some of the political rhetoric. Maybe not quite to that degree, but frankly, it's troubling to hear the rhetoric that you hear today.
Yeah, and you have to be very careful, right? So the whole point of this podcast, the whole point of this show is we want to decrease emotion and increase thinking. Mm-hmm. And then what I've seen is like as emotion goes up, typically thinking tends to go down. And so I just like everybody, just catch yourself. If you're getting too emotional about something, if you're getting too much into this black and white, them versus us thing, just take a couple deep breaths and think that through.
Scott, before Andrew joined, we were talking about getting feedback during our Toastmasters speech today, right? Yeah. And you were saying like someone could give you feedback to help you get better. But if you're
Yeah.
hearing it through a filter of criticism, if you're hearing it through a judgmental, judging your value or your worth, you may take that feedback and view it negatively.
Yeah.
And that's what I see happening, particularly when you talk about left and right or any kind of black and white thinking, is that someone says something that could be interpreted as bad, or maybe the average person would never consider that to be something that should trigger someone. But if your mindset is such that this person is an X type of person and has nefarious motives in mind, then you're going to attribute the negative aspect to that immediately, and then you get triggered. And I'm like, you just need to assume that no one means to offend you. Even if
Yeah.
they do, and even if they aren't meant to be offended, don't get offended. Just
Yeah.
assume no one means to offend you and don't get offended. And
Yeah.
then approach and then you can hopefully sidestep the emotions and try to approach it from that aspect.
And it's hard, Chris. It is so hard because when you hear language, and it happens on both sides, right?
Oh
Everybody's
yeah.
guilty of this. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
all Republicans or anybody who voted for Trump is, I'm like, oh man,
Right.
be careful, right?
Right.
Of that, are all Democrats, are all those liberals, it's like, I'm like, yeah.
Well,
First of all, you just
Scott,
be careful.
you're from California. And you're living in the middle of the country, so obviously you're a left-wing radical liberal. So
Well, and the interesting thing is and I've struggled with this myself because I would say I'm definitely a Democrat. Going to Berkeley, I definitely got a lot of of that left wing in me, and then I think when I went to USC, it's a little more right in certain ways. An MBA program, I became a little more centrist, but then I went to a social work program, definitely leftist. So,
Yeah.
but having said that, I do think, like you said, Scott, is that it is really important that we don't just say everyone is one way or the other. And we, Democrats are as guilty as Republicans when it comes to, really vilifying the other side. The only thing
Yeah.
that I do struggle with is this, and I put myself back in, let's say, Germany. If I really felt and I saw, Hitler coming to power, would I basically say, well, it's just another point of view. I'll respect other people's opinions. This is just, someone spouting off, but maybe, he doesn't really mean what he says, or kind of or diminish, some of the things. And I think that really, when it comes down to it, I mean, what we learned from Hitler, and again, I'm not comparing necessarily what's going on now to Hitler time, but it is a matter of when people say things that, and Maya Angelou once said something to this nature, that, believe what people say. When they say they're going to do something, believe it. Don't always think it's something else. And I think that, World War II gave us a great example of, people were saying all sorts of things. Hitler was saying all sorts of things. And I think the world was saying, well, this is just one person spouting off. But then, obviously it turned into something much worse. And so when we see the political rhetoric today, and we see people saying all sorts of things that sound pretty draconian, then I think it's our right to speak up, and I think we should speak up. So I think it's a fine line between, we don't necessarily need to vilify the person, but we should certainly speak up about the actions that they're talking about and the policies that they're talking about. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree with that because the part that kind of bugs me is the fact that it's always us versus them.
Mhm.
But then the reality is like, well, those guys over there, I mean, they're actually part of us. I mean, so we got to figure out a way where we can start talking together in a way and actually start listening to each other. And we may find, probably almost certainly we'll find, is that, wait a minute, we have more in common than we have in differences, probably. So
But it's easy to listen to demagogues, right? And that's basically what's in charge of both sides. You have a demagogue on both sides.
Yeah.
And it's so easy. And not only that, they're doing what we said earlier. They're spinning to appeal to the masses. There's no nuance in what they say. They're just blunt and telling you what it is. And what ends up happening is that drives a wedge between, like you said, the average person. What we need is someone in the middle to just bring all that middle stuff together and say, that person's trying to peel you off against from one side to the other. And you just need to understand that that's what they're doing. You know, you don't have to go into the facts. You don't have to go into the nuance. You just need to understand their only goal is to build a political base against the other side. And what they're doing is building sides. And you need to recognize that and say, I'm not on either side, I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
And if you can do that on just about everything in the way you think, you can come to whatever conclusion you want on any individual topic. That's fine. You can be left on this and right on that, conservative on this and liberal on that. That's fine. But at the end of the day, you should come to that entire conclusion on your own, not because someone gave you a list of 10 things you should believe because you're a Republican or a Democrat. What it should be is like, these are the 10 things I believe, regardless of if I'm a Republican or a Democrat. And from there, I decide, okay, Republicans represent 6 of those things, Democrats represent 4 of those things, so I'm going to vote with this side or that side. That, to me, is the way, and in every responsible American citizen, individual who lives in this country needs to get to. And that's why you need the critical thinking. If you can't get to that, that's when I have a hard time, because I really don't want you to vote if you can't get to that point. Because then you're voting feelings, you're voting for the demagogue, and the demagogue is the one who's going to take control eventually. We can go into the fact that, you know, wealth is accumulating in smaller and smaller groups of people at the top. I go into deep dives on ChatGPT all the time saying, how much wealth is there today? What's the discrepancy? How many people have what amount of wealth? Today my whole thing was, how much cash is there in existence, and how much has there been over the last decade and the previous decades? And I'm, just all these things, and I look at the numbers, and I don't think there's necessarily a nefarious plan behind it. But as these things change, the demographics change, the way the country is changes, where the power is changes, and now I'm not so sure that the way we've envisioned democracy for the past 200 years will survive another 100.
Yeah, I don't know. It probably won't, Chris, and I'll tell you why. Because people are people, and people reacted and thought the same today as they did 2,000 years ago. And
Rome fell. Rome fell. So, they were considered the greatest civilization at the time.
But I still believe in people. I still believe in that if we upgrade our software and we start asking a little bit better questions. Like I know I hear sometimes it say, like, Democrats will say, "Oh, all Republicans they hate kids and they want dirty water." And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, come on, is that just that's not true actually. And I just, man, we just got to talk to each other. We just seriously got to talk, and we've got to listen to each other.
But again, that's someone trying to score quick points and to rule on emotion, not on actual conversation.
Yeah, and I want to tell you, and I want to give an actual tool, right? What I do sometimes, because I tend to be more emotional than I think I am logical at certain. I'm trying to work through that. But if you start to listen to something and you start to feel this, like, something building, I don't know what it is, like a hate or a self-righteousness or something, that should be a warning sign to you. That should be a warning sign. Like, wait a minute, hang on, just a second. Let me try to unwind some of that and start thinking through this just a little bit more.
Yeah,
I find when I listen to the politicians right now, right? Some of the politicians I listen to, and I was like, oh, that what they're saying makes perfect sense to me. I understand those arguments. Other ones are just spouting whatever they're spouting. Other ones are, I would call it outright lying to me.
Yeah.
And it's not a true lie. It's not a lie in the sense that I could take them to court on it. But it's a misrepresentation of information to get me to think in a certain way, which pisses the hell out of me. It's like, no. What you're saying is BS. What you need to do is give me the information and I'll make my decision. But you're leading me down this road. You're telling me facts from years ago. So the one that got me this week was, who's the guy who got sent out of country who shouldn't have been, and the Supreme Court said you need to bring him back.
Oh yeah,
right. And there's that whole thing going on right now.
Yeah,
and I'm like, I'm listening to Spin say, okay, he used to be, he is a gang member, and I can't figure out, was he still a gang member, or was he once a gang member, or what? Because the facts that I'm picking up are telling me that he was a gang member and is not currently a gang member, and the way they're spinning is like he is still. So they're taking a fact from the past and they're using it to brand him today. And I'm like, listen, you want to tell me information, give me accurate information, and I'll use that. And if you can come to a reasonable explanation based upon that, I'll give you kudos for it. But if you have to go back and misrepresent information to me, there's something wrong. And now I'm actually thinking against you. And so this is where I am at. It's like when you tell me that kind of stuff, I'm assuming you're lying through omission, you're lying through misrepresentation, you're lying through whatever. And now I don't believe you. And that's what's happening with a lot of this stuff.
Well, and that's a general thing. I think across everybody. I think across the whole country, is I think there's a general rule we're not trusting the government as much because we start to realize just how many lies there are. We're starting to realize, like, you can watch Fox, you can watch MSNBC, you can watch CNN, and you got to remember all of those from a business standpoint. These are for-profit business with a business model of I'm going to get my base riled up and I'm going to sell them advertising. I mean, that is the model, and that's what they do. And if you watch it carefully without getting sucked into it, you'll literally see the patterns. I mean, this is engineered. I mean, this is not random. This is like food, right? This food is engineered to get you to eat as much bad food as you possibly can.
One thing that, oh, excuse me, Scott.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done.
Oh, I was just going to say one thing that I didn't realize. I mean, I probably should have realized this, but I didn't realize until just recently is that, a lot of these cable channels are not regulated the same way that ABC and CBS. So over the air free TV, even though cable TV, CNN or some of these stations are, packaged in nowadays. So it seems like they are free, but they're not. So they don't have the same FCC. The FCC regulations over them are not the same as over ABC News and CBS and NBC. So there's a higher standard.
Same thing with social media, that they don't have the same requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is an important thing for us to always, consider, because I think most people would, I mean, it's interesting to see. I would say most people get their news from either social media or from cable, probably even more so than ABC and CBS and NBC nowadays.
Yeah.
So
for the longest time, I was much more in defense of mainstream media because I knew that journalism principles were supposedly in play, right? And so for a long time, I'd say that I would weigh their reporting against any kind of niche reporting on cable or on social media. But what happened is, the niche reporting has gotten out of hand, and you have your far extremists on both sides, giving their vitriol out there. But what I found is, I don't know how mainstream media does it, but they all say the same thing. They're all giving the same message, and it's no longer about let's come to a conclusion based upon information. It's like they're all spinning the same information. And I came to that conclusion during over the last couple of years, but specifically during the last election. It was like I can figure out information on my own just doing internet searches that they don't seem to be able to understand and represent. And I'm not going to fringe things. I'm just pulling information together, with a couple of web searches. How come I can recognize things that they're not even talking about? And that's what really got to me. So I don't trust the overall image of what mainstream media's goal is. I don't think, the ideas of Woodward and Bernstein, and these ideas that they had all these reporters who followed, who were trying to give fair, was it the old Fox term, fair and balanced? It was truly fair and balanced.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anywhere from what I can tell anymore. And maybe it never really existed. Maybe that's just, America in the 50s and, apple pie and all that kind of stuff. And maybe that never really was really true, but that was the image that I had.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's very right. That's why there is I'll make another pitch for our little podcast here, is that you've got to start thinking critically. And here's the thing is, it's hard work. It's so easy it's like just our current food site. It's just so easy to eat ding dongs and chips all day, right? Because it's delicious and you'll love it and everything. It's not good for you long term, though. I mean, in fact, it will kill you long term.
Well, I mean, I think, Scott, we touched on it a little bit last week when I went down the vaccine rabbit hole, right? And I was trying to, what triggered it was that second person had died from measles. And so I said, well, how many people have died from the actual measles shot, And it said none. And I'm like, really? None? Millions of people have gotten it and none have died? And then so I started to drill down into it and is it really none? Or maybe there were like secondary complications and therefore they don't count. And so, those don't count. They need to attribute it directly to the vaccine to say that the vaccine was the cause. So I'm kind of like, well, I don't believe it's zero, but then I also don't believe it's a big problem either. So,
Yeah,
I'm citing, I come from the idea that the vaccines are good science. So I come from that viewpoint. So I'm slightly biased in that way, but I didn't see anything. And so I went down to look at all the children's vaccines and kind of figured out what it was. And overall, for society, vaccines are great. We need them for society because it saves more people than not, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I started going into like, well, so how was the decision made for COVID vaccines? What was the threshold? What was the ROI required? Basically,
Right.
if it saved more people than it killed, it was considered enough. I'm like, that's a little problematic.
Right.
Going to the effort of getting a shot, going to the effort of doing all these activities, and then saying you only saved one extra life, that wouldn't
Right,
cut it,
right.
right? So there's got to be some threshold there. And honestly, there's no threshold. Every vaccine is on its own criteria as to how they judge it. So, and then I think I mentioned to you that the government redefined what a vaccine is so that they can incorporate mRNA vaccines into it. And I'm like, maybe they shouldn't have. Maybe they should have kept it as a different term, immune booster or something different, so that it didn't trigger all the arguments that we had. But it's what we're told and what we hear in the simplified version is just not. It's probably 80% wrong.
Yeah.
But it's 20% right, which is all they care about is you got 20% of it at least.
Yeah, that's right enough. And this is why I tend to trust engineers and people in the science fields a little bit more, because we're trained to follow a very rigorous process to get to the truth, whatever the truth is actually. And we've defined our terms very, very carefully. So when we use certain words, it's like we're very precise in what that word means. And this is a beautiful technique. If you want to mess people up, just start changing definitions of words, right? So now I'm thinking, well, I think you're talking about this, but really you're talking about something different. And that's how you weaponize
You
stuff.
redefine the argument.
Right.
You redefine the argument. And from my marketing side of things, that's what I want to do. I want to redefine the word, right?
Yep.
And it's a devious technique.
Well, Scott, the thing
It is.
you were mentioning though about engineers, and I went specifically into one field that's hard science to another one that's the soft sciences, and in fact,
Yeah.
that was my goal to kind of bring some of the hard science part of me to the soft sciences, and I went into so I was an engineer, and the thing that I was going to say about like civil engineering or electrical or computer engineering, I mean, the thing that's amazing about it is that you can put it together, and just about every time you will get a certain result. I mean, there's
Yeah.
not like, well, kind of work. I mean, basically, if you're building a skyscraper and you got these plans 100% of the time, based upon all the calculations, this thing's going to work, unless there's some sort of unforeseen soil issue or something like that. But assuming everything is done, and even the soil preparation needs to be done to a certain, compaction and certain, all that stuff. So, I mean, you're going from a field that, is about as sure, as they come, or if you're making a widget, I mean, every single widget is going to be identical, and if they're not, then that business will probably go out of business because there is an importance of this replication. Whereas in the world of therapy, I mean, every case is so different, and the research that's done, even CBT, I was talking to you about that earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy, that's probably the most evidence-based of all the therapies out there, and there's been so much research that's been done in so many different applications, but it really still comes down to the person. There could be 90%, 95% say this is the way to go. And by the way, it's never quite that high, but let's say it's even say 70%, of the studies say using CBT with this particular situation will result in 50% reduction or whatever of the symptoms. And the reality is that it's so case specific. And the studies are based upon these rigorous requirements, and the applicability may not always be there. So it really does come down to using your tools that evidence base, whatever the best evidence base is to help a person. But the reality is that you may need to go to the second the best tool and the third best tool, and it's a very different world than the world of engineering by far.
So, so Andrew, can you go back? Because you mentioned two terms. I'd like you to precisely define those, if you could. You
Sure.
mentioned, like, I think a hard science, and then you went to more of a soft
Mhm.
science. I can't remember the exact terms you use.
Yeah, the hard
Um,
sciences, I think of like engineering as a hard science where there are equations that I was mentioning earlier. Just, you put, like with concrete, you put this much water with this much sand with this much cement mixture, and you mix it and you let it sit. It will, be whatever and it's compacted in a certain way, prepared in a certain way, you know, almost every single time it will be at a certain level of compaction and will have a certain strength to it. Whereas,
okay.
Repeatable results.
what was that?
Repeatable results.
Repeatable results. Whereas
And you have a high degree of confidence in that,
high
as we
degree of
mentioned.
confidence that same
Gotcha.
result is going to come out every single time.
Gotcha. Yes.
Whereas in the
Yes.
soft sciences, and again, it's not to demean the soft sciences, because the soft sciences in certain ways are even more difficult because of there's so many variabilities. Human beings are so variable that the best you can do is basically do studies like what we do. And I mean, not me personally, but a lot of universities, they'll do all these studies and they'll get groups of people that have certain backgrounds and they'll try to study this particular, situation. Such as like I've mentioned to you before, dialectical behavior therapy, which is an evidence-based treatment that's based upon CBT, but also on Eastern kind of meditation and kind of the two together. But when they were testing DBT at the beginning, it basically used in an outpatient setting with women that had certain traits to see,
Hmm.
and they were looking for people that had borderline personality disorder, which basically are the people who are, if you see people cutting on themselves or swallowing
Mm.
things or self-harm, that's there's a lot of other traits, but that's probably the most signature trait. So they did a lot of studies on people that had these sort of traits, and it was outpatient for women, and they found that DBT was effective. And then they started to do studies with different populations and found it was effective with a lot of different populations. And so DBT was found to be very successful with people with borderline personality disorder, but also people with eating disorders, people with depression, anxiety, all sorts of things. They studied it and applied it in different situations. But again, it comes down to that specific individual that frankly may not, respond well to DBT. And been a DBT practitioner. I did that for about 15 years, and it doesn't work for everybody. Frankly, you need medication is really important. Um, and also I'm working in an inpatient setting. So a lot of the studies were done outpatient. And so outpatient, people are coming by choice, whereas an inpatient, they still need to sign up by choice, but it's not as if they have the world as their oyster that they can choose other sort of things. It's basically you could use, you know, um, therapy or treatment as usual, or you can try DBT. And some of the people did try DBT, and it was a lot of work for them. And cognitively speaking, Scott, as you were saying, it requires a lot from them too. So because there's a lot of challenging thoughts, challenging your emotions, how to kind of basically navigate the world, particularly when you have very high emotions that tell you and thoughts that tell you, hey, I need to hurt myself, or frankly hurt others at times. So it's a really DBT can be a very effective tool, but the point being that it's not like engineering that, if you had a tool like DBT in engineering, every single time, every single person would be would be fixed. That doesn't happen in DBT. It's a tool and it can be very effective, but it doesn't necessarily help everybody.
maybe that was construction like 200 years ago, right?
Right.
Before they had construction science, then they had, well, let's try brick. Let's
Right.
try mud. Let's try wood.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah,
See,
we're
so
probably where
Andrew,
engineering was, but even then, some buildings have lasted for years, and so I would still say that, therapy is still a very, we do our best, and what they do say, which is very interesting, is that it's the therapeutic alliance that is more important than any modality. So better, more important than DBT, CBT, psychodynamic therapies, more the Freudian therapies, that really it comes down to that relationship that the therapist has with the client. That is what dictates most the most success, and they've found that through studies.
so is that just so you say hard science versus soft science? I guess I want to lump them all into one.
Mhm.
Is when you're dealing with people, is the system just more complicated? It sounds like it's more complicated. People are more complicated than mixing cement, it
Yeah,
sounds
I,
like,
I
right?
think, and I think it's because, I mean, if everyone was a robot, then
Yeah. Yeah.
basically, yeah, so then the results would be the same. But because everyone is so different, I mean, there literally are no two people that are identical, and even identical twins have differences, right?
So,
So
Yeah.
so
there's
can
so much.
I look at that instead of saying it's more complicated, which I get your point. It's there's more variables.
Oh,
Like the
totally.
whole
Oh,
idea
yeah,
of science is to control your variables in any experiment, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the cement idea is like you gave ratios. It's like I use this much cement, I use this type of
Mhm.
cement, there's this chemical background.
Yep.
You're actually controlling for so many variables that
Yep.
the outcomes are limited in what they could be.
Yeah.
And if you can get your soft sciences to a point where you can control for the variables, maybe you can get to a point where you can get 80, 90, 100% results. But the problem is just the sheer number of variables. No two people, even if they live the exact same life, are going to be the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, if I can summarize more variables, what do we call it? It's just a harder problem.
Oh, much more difficult, I think. I mean, although I'm not putting down either one because, engineering, I found civil engineering extremely challenging, and frankly, electrical engineering is also I mean, all the engineering, mechanical engineering, very challenging. Um, bodies in motion. At least with the civil engineering, most, you're not dealing so much with bodies in motion unless you're dealing with earthquake forces or wind loads or snow loads. But for the most part, you're dealing with, bodies in motion that are static. And from that standpoint, it really is, easier. But still, I mean, when you're talking about building a bridge and all the loads and the variables, and it's not just the thing that's interesting with engineering is that it's not just the the physics of things, but it's also the physics of the actual components and the materials,
Yeah.
and to make
Yeah.
sure that the materials are of a certain quality and grade. And then you also have the requirements of a particular city and county and state and federal government. So you have all these ordinances that are acting upon what you can use in a particular situation. So it can be very complicated, and so even though the results may be, pretty predictable, just navigating all that needs to go into there is a lot. There's a lot that goes into there. And frankly, I think that just like they have in therapy, like as a therapist, I had to go through some internship where I actually was out there in the field and doing things. I think that there really should be more internships in engineering. I know that there are some, but that should be like a core requirement that you go and you intern someplace and really find out what it's really like, because it's different out there in the world. And in fact, there's a lot of expectations that you already know a lot, at least where I was, that you kind of
Yeah.
know things and you're good to go. Whereas in it's not that assumption in the world of therapy. And so what I'm recommending is we could take, even though I was thinking you could take a lot from engineering and put it into therapy, to make things maybe more repeatable. I like the way that therapy is kind of set up to have these internships. And if you could take that and really make that in undergraduate a core piece of it, I think that that would also be really important too. To refine the skills, because once you're out there, it depends where you're at, obviously, but where I was, and I was in a pretty large organization, the city of LA. You could speak to some people about it, but it seems like that they could have benefited from having an internship program. I think that it would have helped, frankly.
Hey, Andrew, I want to kind of move in a different direction if
Sure,
you're okay with that.
sure.
It has to do with therapy, but I want to, because so Chris and I, we talk a lot about faith, belief, trust, and God. How important, well, I know I'm like, hopefully in engineering, you're supposed to kind of be converging. Now
Right.
we're diverging again or whatever. How important is all of that? How important is belief in something bigger than yourself in all of this?
That's a good question, because I mean, in DBT, I'll relate it to DBT. And a lot of times people will, um, and people with borderline personality, or frankly with any disorders, that they'll do these things and they'll hurt themselves because of cognitions and thoughts and emotions that um, are just really very extreme. And the thing that we start off with when we start off with patients is, what is your life worth living goal? What do you want in life? And it could be a
Hmm.
spiritual goal, it could be a material goal, but what is it that's bigger than yourself, bigger than that you're going towards? And a lot of times we try to eh, redirect them, in that way, so that we give them a chance to pause and to think, what is that life worth living goal before I go ahead and swallow this pen, or stick a knife into my arm, or do something. So we want to give them that opportunity to kind of take a breather. And that's one of the skills too, is, to stop, which is basically stop, stop, take a step back, observe what your surroundings are, and observe and it could even be observe what your life worth living goals are, and then proceed mindfully. And,
Mhm.
to me, I think that there's so many skills. There's like 30 to 40 skills in DBT, but that one I like in particular just because it really, if you had to just do one thing, boom, I'm just about to do something. Okay, let me just stop, take a step back, observe, take a few breaths, and, is this in alignment with my life worth living goal? If it's not, then let me talk to someone. Let me reconsider what I'm just about to do. And it doesn't have to be something as severe as, taking your own life. It could be in day-to-day things. I'm about to say something to someone because someone really, someone just cut me off, and so I just want to, ram that car, or I just want to, speed up and, give them the bird. So it could be as simple as saying, stop, you know,
Yeah.
take a step back, observe your emotions, everything that's going on, and then proceed mindfully. Is me cutting that person off, or me trying to ram that person, is that in alignment with my goals, which is, maybe my goal is to have, a beautiful time with my family, and to give back to the community, or whatever it might be. And if you're stuck in behind bars, how are you going to be able to do that as
Yeah.
effectively?
Right. Yeah. That applies to everything. Chris and I have also talked about this concept of short-term gratification versus long-term. I mean, and it could apply to anything. So it might be that you get tremendous short-term pleasure out of doing something, but it definitely comes at a cost,
Oh,
right?
definitely.
You pay for that in some way. And does that align with your long-term goals? That is so good, because you're forcing to think in terms of my future self. And my thought is, like, let's say you want to stab yourself with a knife. I can't even imagine why somebody'd want to do this. But just take 5 minutes. You can always stab yourself in the future, but just take 5 minutes to think this through, right? It may not be the best move because there's serious penalties to stabbing
Oh,
yourself
sure.
with a knife.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I mean, serious
and what they
penalties.
say is that you need a little bit of time for your brain to kind of catch up with your emotions. I mean,
Yes.
and I mean, that's not just a saying. They've actually looked through science at how the brain works, and they've seen that, you really do need a little bit of time, just, a matter of seconds at times, just for the brain to catch up with your emotions where you want to go with something. And so that's why it's so important to, take a step back, breathe, allow yourself that chance to get resettled and move forward. We say in DBT in particular that you could be in your emotion mind, your rational mind, or your wise mind. And your emotional mind is where your emotion kind of rules your actions, where your wise mind is, or your a rational mind is, that, if the rules say I must do this, I follow the rules exactly this way with no, not heeding to any emotions, but I'm just going to do it this way. And the wise mind kind of takes both of those. So if someone, like, let's take someone trying to run you off the road, or change
Yeah.
it to your lane example. So the emotion mind said, F that person, how can that person do that? Really
Yeah.
pissed off. And then the wise mind says, yeah, but if you now, ram him, you're going to go to jail. There's just,
Yeah.
and then the wise mind says, I can have both. I can be pissed off at that person, and I could do what's effective. By the way, that's a big word that we use also in DBT, effective, by not doing that. And maybe what I do is, take down the number of that person and call the police or do something, but be effective. Is that being effective, trying to ram somebody that went into your lane? And by the way, sometimes we also jump to conclusions too. That person
Yeah.
that went into your lane, you're assuming that that person had ill intent. Maybe that
Right.
person was, just maybe they're in an argument with somebody, and they just don't,
Yeah.
they're not paying attention to the road, or maybe they just found out that someone passed away and they're just not paying attention. So I mean, there could be so many explanations, we just
Yeah.
don't know. But we're going to this opinion of, hey, this person must have something in it, or in it for me, and so I'm going to get that person back. So,
Yeah.
and that goes back to CBT, that you can have different cognitions that would change your thoughts, different thoughts that would change your emotions, that can change your behavior. So
That's awesome. This is awesome. So this kind of is like jujitsu. Sorry, here we go again with jujitsu. But it's like you get this literally trained into you because at the beginning of jujitsu, well, anytime during, you're on the bottom and you literally feel like this person is crushing the life out of you, and you start freaking out and you don't know what to do, and you just start basically, for all intents and purposes, you just start spazzing out, completely ineffective. And so what they're teaching you, or what you get taught through this just repetition of just slowly applying more and more pressure to you, is that they teach you new techniques and new tools. So you're thinking, wait a minute, this is really uncomfortable, but this is not immediately killing me. So you can start to use little techniques where you can create a little bit of space, where you can just give yourself a little bit of time. We call it slowing things down, right? You just want to slow this down a little bit so I can start to think about what I can do to get out of this.
oh, definitely,
And
definitely.
because the moment you stop thinking in jujitsu,
Mhm.
that's when you're in big, big trouble. Especially if the other person knows what they're doing. And so this is awesome. You have a system, you have a set of skills and techniques used to help yourself not get, because my hunch is that the problem is if you get too emotional, there is a tipping point where you can't come back from it.
Yeah.
So the earlier you can recognize this, you don't want to get right to the edge. You want to make the decision far away from the edge
Well,
as
that's the
much
thing
as
in
possible.
that's true, and that's the thing in DBT too. We try to gauge where the patient is. So if they're at like a 0 to 10, if they're like at a 2 or 3, we'll use certain skills. But if they're like at a 9 or 10, we'll use other skills that could be
Yeah,
effective. So
yeah.
yeah. But just to let you know, gentlemen, I'm sorry. I have an appointment, so I'm at 2:30, so I'm running a little bit over that time. But I'd love to come back and, finish any
Yeah,
conversation about DP
Yeah,
or
this is
anything else
awesome.
that you have. And I really
I'd
appreciate
love to
you.
apply that, yeah, your tools and thinking on how to get someone to slow down their emotional response.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yes,
mean,
that
I'd
could be
be happy
super
to talk
helpful.
more about that or anything that you'd like to discuss. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate you guys having me on. And you're doing a great
Thanks
job,
for coming
great
on.
service trying to
Yeah,
get down
Andrew.
to the facts of things. So I appreciate it. But you guys have a great
Awesome.
weekend, okay?
Okay,
All
Andrew.
right.
All
Good.
right, you
Bye-bye.
take
Happy
care.
Friday.
Bye now.
So
Yeah, I
Scott,
think that's what it is, Chris. That's the core, is like we need to develop skills, because my thought has always been you get angry or frustrated or feel overwhelmed when you don't have the skills to deal with that problem, actually.
yeah, what I was thinking of is, so he does therapy, or he's a therapist.
Yes.
And why do you need therapy? You need it because your mind isn't working the way you want it to work.
Yeah, because you have the outside influences or
Yeah.
inside influence, they're overwhelming you and you don't know what to do.
I don't want to say anyone's broken in their thinking, because I don't think that's the approach we want to take. We want to take the idea that there is this better way of thinking, this idealistic way, this way that would be more beneficial to you to think.
Yes.
And I think you and I think that means the ability to apply more critical thinking in your flow. And so what happens here is, like, if someone had a moment to think critically and was geared towards it, they probably wouldn't try to commit suicide. They probably wouldn't try to hurt themselves or even hurt other people, because logically that doesn't make sense in most situations. You're not in a fight or die situation where you need to defend yourself in most
Yeah.
cases. So basically what we're saying is, anything that can interrupt the biological, and I'm assuming emotional is biological because of biochemistry, and that,
Yeah.
maybe that's a thing for discussion, but that biological response that you've got needs to be interfered with in a way, and whatever tool will throw a wrench in the works to give you a moment to think is kind of what we're talking about.
Well, yes, exactly right. And to some extent it's got to be trained out of you. You've just got to be just a little bit of exposure, and they just increase the intensity of it. Because I remember in jiu-jitsu, the stuff the first day that would freak me out, 6 months later, I'd be like laughing. I mean, this is like, it's like, this is not, I can't even imagine I got freaked out from this before, you know?
I'm wondering, skepticism just came to my mind. I am very skeptical of people's motivations when they say
Okay.
something.
Okay. Yeah.
So when I hear something on the news and you say a fact,
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the mindset that you're in when you tell me that fact. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, I'm assuming certain things about you and your mindset. If you're a scientist, I assume certain things in the way you think. If you're a marketing person or a salesman, I'm assuming other things about your character, right? So
Yeah.
I'm assuming all these things, but I'm trying to interpret the thing you said from what I think your mindset is. And therefore, I can try to understand the intent of what you're saying. A scientist is giving me facts. A salesman's trying to affect a decision out of me, or an action out of me. And
Yeah.
I go through all those things. And so I'm very skeptical of what I hear, and I try to put it into a frame of reference to understand why. What's the purpose of that, right? And so I find, if I go and find information on my own, I'm much more open to the idea that there's not a bias in it, although
Yeah.
I may have my own bias in it, that the information I'm collecting isn't automatically biased. But I will still look and say, who made this fact? Who did this study? Who funded it? All those things still come across. But I think for me, skepticism is one of the biggest things that slows me down, because it takes a moment for me to put things into perspective.
Yeah, that's common. So if I was trying to sell to you, the biggest thing that I would try to do if I wanted to manipulate you is I've got to make you believe that it's your idea, that you've discovered this, instead of me implanting the idea. And
Or you've got to show me a value proposition that fits with what you know about me.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
And I guess your best way to do that is to give me enough facts that I come to that conclusion, and it is my idea. So you led me to make the decision because you fed me the facts that would get me to that decision.
Yeah, and here's the cool thing about it, Chris, and this is the problem most salespeople make, right? This is, I'm going after salespeople right now. It's like you think that you have to lie to the person, you think you have to manipulate the other person, and you don't, right? You don't. It's like what I need to do is I just need to create an environment for you where you can make the decision on your own. And so I would acknowledge this. I would say, hey, Chris, you seem like a very analytical idea. I know in order to convince you from my point of view, you need a bunch of facts. So let me ask you a question. How much data, what kind of data do you need me to provide to you so that you would like kind of see things the way I see things? And you'll freaking get back to me.
I think that's what's throwing me off from the politicians that this last couple of weeks that are irking me, is that it feels like they're just trying to manipulate me.
Yeah,
and that's what's coming across is the way you're presenting information shows that you're trying to manipulate me, and it just comes through.
And it feels gross. It feels horrible. Nobody wants to.
Oh no! My immediate thought is, get that guy out of there. I want him gone. I don't care what, drop him off the face of the earth. I don't need that kind of person in there.
Yeah, you're going the wrong way.
And it makes me very unforgiving of that person, right? In most cases, if someone screws up and reports the wrong thing, I'm going to be, it's dumb, but okay, I can forgive you for making a mistake. I can't forgive you for lying to me.
Yeah. And so if I'm trying to manipulate you, or maybe not manipulate, but if I'm trying to get you to see things my way, I may eventually call you at some point on it, because I said, Chris, we've been talking about this for a month. I've given you reams of stacks of paper. It's like at this point, I don't think it's about data. There's something else going on in your mind. Maybe you're fearful to move, but at some point, dude, you just got to make a decision, right? At some point, you've got to decide. As long as I've given you everything you've asked for.
Yeah. And that's the one thing when I deal with salespeople, I often am interested in whatever the topic is, and I've got to be clear to them that this is me wanting to know more about it.
Yeah,
I may or may not decide organically to buy, but don't think that this is making the sale. Think of that this is you investing in me understanding, and then I may come to that conclusion.
Yeah, right.
But I'm going to make my own decision on that, right? And you might be able to influence that, but at the end of the day, the things you value aren't the same. There was a guy who was trying to sell supplements to me. He has his side gig, and he sent me a bunch of. I talked to him a bit, and he sent me a bunch of stuff, and everything he's sending me is testimonials about people who've done this and have gotten things. I'm like, testimonials don't sell me.
Yeah, I mean, they may help.
I'm not a person who testimonials. You give me facts. You give me that 98% of the people who try this are successful. That's a number. You just show me 100 guys who said this worked for me. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you don't know how many
people. A lot of people are impacted by testimonials.
Well, of course they work like great, but they don't work as well now because we know they're all made up, right? They're all lies. So
I can make them all up. Yeah. So one thing that came up with, so Andrew had an interesting take there, where he said, soft sciences have been adopting a lot of the practices of the hard sciences to get better at predicting outcomes.
Yes.
But he was saying that maybe the hard sciences need to adopt some of the soft sciences attitudes so they get better at it. And
absolutely,
what occurred to me is, do you remember the Tacoma Narrows Bridge incident?
No.
This is so in Washington, Tacoma. And basically what happened was they built this bridge across the gorge there. Mm-hmm. And it was all great, and they were showing it. And then at one point, the wind whipped up, and it hit a harmonic frequency that caused the bridge to vibrate. And so they have that video of the bridge kind of doing this, and the guy walking down it, right? And it's like, science is great until there's something you didn't consider.
Yeah, right.
You need to get that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, science is great. So within the constraints that you figured your problem for, science is perfect. You can predict it, with almost 100% accuracy. Right. But then something happens that changes those constraints, and it's like, oh, we didn't think about that.
Yeah, we didn't think about that. Right. The constraints move. Yeah, we didn't think about that. Right.
And so that's one thing where I think a soft science has to remain open to those unknowns, and always has to have a caveat of it depends.
I think, and so in my mind, I would just want to simplify it down to the fact that the soft sciences, it's just when you're dealing with people, you're just trying to solve harder problems. There's more variables. And when I say harder, I mean more variables to consider.
Yeah, because I don't want to say harder, because I think there's plenty of hard science problems. I think the reason why we're so good at science is because we spent a lot of time and effort figuring out those hard things. And maybe once we do that...
Yeah, but I'm going to push back against that. Building a building, I think, as technically difficult, is not even in the same ballpark as building a human being. The human being is, I would say, maybe a million times more complex, right? In fact, we don't even understand like what's living and what's not living and how, I mean, we don't even understand certain fundamentals of things yet.
Sure.
And so I just think it's the problem is just way harder. There's just way more going on.
Yeah, yet I would consider a life science a hard science and psychology, psychiatry a soft science. So you talk about, biology. Biology to me is a hard science, and yet it's exactly what you're saying. It's complex. So to me, the line isn't right there where it's like life versus a living creature versus a non-living creature. I think the line there is that there's a lot of variables that we don't understand,
Yeah,
and we
there's a lot
haven't
of
spent two millennia trying to figure out life as we have the other things. And maybe it is easier because we can control the variables. It's hard to control a person. It's easier to control, the outcome of a product, of a hard
yeah,
product.
yeah,
The other thing that occurred to me was, and I think I've hinted at this in the past, is I think a lot of what happened was after World War II, science won the war for the US, right?
yeah, right.
Science gave us the A bomb, and we won the war because of that. And so I think a lot of science was respected at the time through the 50s and Bell Labs and all that kind of stuff that was going
Yeah,
on to develop new technology. And I think a lot of your soft sciences saw value in becoming more like the hard sciences. So they started to adopt more rigorous scientific method. They started to do more clinical trials and actual tests and things that actually showed results. And I think by trying to become more science related, they took on the idea that they were as respected as science was in its results. And
yeah.
I think over the last couple of decades, that's come into question in the schools. The schools think, oh yeah, I'm a doctor of whatever soft science, therefore I'm just as good as a doctor, a PhD in physics or something like that. And it's like just as good is subjective, but as far as being able to be proven correct, it's not
Yeah.
the same thing. I can prove physics problems correct much easier than I can prove a psychiatrist is correct in their theories.
Well, it's simpler, right? It's simpler, and that's why
Well,
I
it goes
tend
back to
to
your idea of simple. Yeah, it's a simpler problem because of the variable issue. But I
and
think,
and yeah, I can have more confidence in it, which tends to make me go towards hard sciences because I feel more comfortable with that.
but then if I think then that my soft science is as, I don't say valuable, not the term, as respected in results as a hard science, then I may start to act in a way that doesn't jive with what the average American sees. And that's what I think
Oh
happened
yeah,
with a lot of the soft sciences is I think a lot of the kind of the fringe parts of the woke movement and some of the other things were based upon this idea that, look, this is science. We've done science on diversity. We've done science on gender. No, you've done science on biology. You've tried to apply science to
yeah.
gender. And I don't know that the rest of us agree that it worked.
Well, I think it's a simple thing. It's like, okay, when you say science, what do you mean? Like, define that for
Well,
me.
I would just go. Let's go with a simple answer. You applied scientific method, and you're basically saying we're just like any other science out there.
Oh boy, that's a tough one to agree with.
Not
Yeah.
all sciences are created equal.
Is equal. So I wanted to bring a point up, and I just forgot this point. So I'll come back to it actually, but I thought it was really good. So, anyways, that's what happens when you get older; you start forgetting stuff.
Oh yeah, it does. You don't have to be that old to have it happen. I mean, senior moments in your 40s, then in your 50s, and then pretty soon you're a senior. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, here's what it was. Here's what it was. So this is where we fundamentally have to come into the question of can science, and when I say science, I typically tend to mean the scientific method, that particular approach, solve every problem. And I'm going to say no, because that's when you get philosophy and religion coming into things that can solve other problems that hard science can't solve. I mean, for God's sake, Chris, I can't even find what the perfect diet is for a human being to eat. It's like nobody can give me. I mean, you're going to get 27 different answers, right?
Yeah, I don't agree with you 100%, but I also don't disagree with you all that
Yeah,
much. So
right.
I think that scientific method, logic, and reason can be used to solve any problem. The problem is it may require such an understanding of the constraints and variables that it's not feasible for a person, at least in the current world that we live in today, to
No,
be
very
able
well
to solve
defined.
it.
That I agree with that 100%, and that's what I
Right?
meant when I said that. But you're exactly right,
Yeah.
because ultimately I just go to the fact that look, we're just not smart enough to
So
fully.
in theory, scientific method is foolproof. In practice, humans are not.
Yeah, we're just not smart enough. We have too
And,
many.
and we're and so scientific method is the tool. We are the tool user, and we're the ones who are flawed.
Yeah, I think so. I think I 100% agree with that, which leads me to another problem that I have, which is logic and critical thinking. And is logic the right tool? Is there inherent problems in logic? Is it not complete? Because I tend to put a lot of weight on if I'm logical enough, I can pretty much solve any problem. And I mean, is how true is that? I guess
Logic feels almost like a law of the universe.
it
Almost.
feels like it. Yeah.
Right? And so that's what we kind of default to, is that we kind of treat logic as like a law of gravity. Logic is somehow going to be true and
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
And the problem is it's constructed by humans, by the mind of a human.
Yeah.
Generally, I side on yes, it is a law of the universe, but I'm not 100% behind that. I'm maybe 70% behind that. I wonder if our logic is flawed in some way. Like it's like when you get to quantum mechanics versus Newtonian physics,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Newtonian physics breaks at a certain point where quantum mechanics comes into play.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe logic breaks at some point where something else comes into play.
And I think so. And I think I just kind of just calm myself down. I think for now, for the moment, it's the best tool that we've got. So let's go with that. And at some point, we may find limitations. Like, for instance, like this tool here, right? This is a little long reach, like pair of needle nose pliers, actually. This can solve a lot of problems, but it doesn't solve every problem, right? I mean, then I have another pair that's got kind of like a little curve on it for doing other things. This is a great tool for some problems. And, when I run into problems this thing can't solve, I'll go get another tool, right?
So I would say for the majority of problems and situations that a human can come up with or is going to experience in their life, logic seems to almost always be something you can apply and get a positive benefit out of.
I think so.
Right? Now, there's going to be fringe things that may not fit into that bubble. There's going to be
Right.
things that we haven't experienced yet, or we don't know, or we don't even understand that we're experiencing it because we don't have the ability to comprehend it as of yet, or to experience it. We don't have the senses maybe to experience these things going on around us. I don't know.
Right,
But the idea is there's a possibility that logic breaks down at some point. But I mean, really, if we go to what's the basic example of logic, right? A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C.
Yeah, right.
Right. I mean that's mathematical. It's logical. It makes sense that we would apply that, but it breaks down as soon as you start to change any little tiny definition or piece of that. But I mean, we probably should talk a little bit about the types of logic too, right? Inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, all the different types of reasoning that go into that. That would probably be a good exercise for us to do as well. Say, this is so when you and I are thinking something through, we understand that we're deducing this, or how are we coming to this conclusion?
I think that'd be really good because I know that my logic is flawed because I think I'm okay at some basic logic. Maybe I'm like a blue belt at logic, but I don't think I'm a black belt at logic. And there's people that are probably can apply logic much better than I can.
Yeah. And some of them died centuries ago, and yet they're still better at logic than we'll ever be. So,
yeah, and I was thinking about that the other day. I want to go on just a little different course, actually. You think about how in the heck did these, especially some of the Greeks, right, the early people, how the heck did they figure this stuff out? Because they didn't have computers, they didn't have this. But I think one thing they did have that we don't have is that they didn't have near as many distractions as we have. I mean, they didn't have airplanes flying over. They didn't have a lot of nonsense going on. They could literally just set for hours. I know I was reading a book on, what's the guy's name? Da Vinci, and how he drew stuff, actually. There was a story where he would just sit there and literally look at a plant leaf for like 10 hours with his notebook and just start drawing and thinking and looking at these patterns. I mean, who in the heck can sit and do something for 10 hours? I know I can. I get bored pretty easily. I mean, I don't have that level of concentration. And I don't know.
I don't know. I do, but the problem is I get distracted with other things, right? So like I'll be watching TV at night and I'll go, I need to go into my office, sit down and just start writing stuff down, right? So I've got half a dozen things in the last few days that I want to expand on in my thinking.
Yeah.
And it takes time for me to sit down. And this isn't journaling. This isn't sitting down for 15 minutes or half an hour and journaling. This is me sitting down and thinking through scenarios, doing, thought exercises and reasoning things out. So, I mentioned earlier, one of the things I looked at was, I was watching an episode of the TV show Leverage yesterday.
Yeah.
And they made a comment that there's only $500. This is when 2000, whatever, when the show was made, that there's only $500 of cash in the system for every American alive.
Oh, interesting.
Because we know that the amount of cash in the system is actually much less than the amount of dollars in the economy.
Yeah, because you're talking M1, M2, M3 money supply stuff.
So I said, okay, how much cash is there in the world today? And it was like,
and when you say cash, you mean physical, like currency?
I mean currency. I mean dollar bills, right?
Yeah.
So and it said there's 2.3 billion.
Okay.
Trillion. 2.3 trillion. So I said, okay, let's figure out how many Americans are there. 330 million. Okay, so how many dollars per American is that? A little over $7,000. I said, oh, that's interesting. So there's 7,000 physical dollars for every American. The thing is, most of that's actually held by foreign countries and stuff, because most of it we're not going to see. It's not in circulation. But then I said, okay, let me go back decades and let's see how much money was in the system. And so in 75 was the first number they gave me.
And do you mean currency? Money.
Currency. How much currency? I'm back. I'm stuck on currency here.
Gotcha,
how much currency was there in the system back then? And it was like $400.
Okay, yeah.
Per American. And so over the course of time, you see it go up and jump. It hits 700 and then 800. And actually, at one point, it went down and then it went back up. And then, in the past 15 years, we've had a heck of amount of economic growth. So it went up a lot. But then I said, okay, so how big was the economy in each of those scenarios, right? It was 1.6 trillion in 75. We're at 26 trillion today. So
you're saying over the course, economy, you mean GDP?
Yeah, total GDP. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
So 26 trillion today is what it showed. So then I said, okay, as a fraction, as a ratio of amount of currency cash versus size of economy, what is it? And so it was like 4% in 1975, and it's like 8% today. So we have twice as much cash floating in the system on a percentage basis as we did in 1975.
Yeah.
And it just made me wonder, so why do we need more physical cash today? And I looked at the population. The population back then was 220 million. Today we're 330 million. So I start to go through all these things and I start to look at the numbers and say, what does it mean? Why does this grow faster than that? Why isn't everything growing at the same rate? If population goes up 50%, why doesn't everything go up at 50%, right? And so I look at that and then I try to suppose reasons why that might occur. This is the way my mind works. I just go through and so this to me is a thought exercise. I got some facts. Now can I create a narrative or story that makes sense to me with what I know that would tie those facts together? And that to me is a fun exercise to do.
Well, that is what you've described is the scientific method, actually, because you take a set of facts and then you basically take, I'm going to call it an educated guess. I think they call it a hypothesis technically, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, therefore this should be true. Now let me go run an experiment to see if this is actually true or not.
Yes. And of course I can't run an experiment, but what I can do is delve deeper and start looking for specific facts that either refute or prove what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing this right, I should also try to refute my information. I should be trying to break it as well.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Let's say, for instance, you say something is true, right? 100% true. All I have to do to completely break that whole thing is find one case where it's not true, and your whole house comes down.
Until I find the reason why that wasn't true. Because usually there's some variable that actually caused it. If I can isolate it, I can refine my theory to actually include that, right?
But I'm saying that stated theory you have, that is now broken. It's no longer true, right?
Correct.
Because to me, definition, true means true in every single possible scenario. And that's why I think we have to start putting constraints on things. It's like you say, well, this is true as long as, it's within this box, right? As long as we put these constraints around. And still, a lot of people will poo-poo that. But I'm telling you, that can still be intensely useful because I know that I have a really high degree of success as long as I stay within my bubble, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you get obsessed with the fringe, the edge cases, it will slow down action, right? So from a thought experiment scientific viewpoint, it's fine to go into all and it's fine to consider all the edge cases and try to build a scenario that incorporates all
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
edge cases. From an actual let's take action and decisions, that slows you down. You've got to say, okay, I'm comfortable that this will be right 80% of the time, or 70% of the time, or 90% of the time, and therefore we'll make a decision based upon this, right?
Yeah, that is
And
exactly right. That's it, right. And I think we've got to bias towards action. And then we should come up with a number, like what percentage of confidence do I need before I'll start moving? And I would put that number around maybe 60 on the low end, depending on how bad it's going to be if I mess up, to maybe up to like 80 or 90% on the high
well,
end, if the risk is
that,
high, you
that's why
know?
I like Colin Powell's 40-70 rule, right? As long as you got 40%, you can make a decision. You can make an educated decision, and if you wait past 70, you're waiting too long.
That probably makes sense. I think I would like to add in how serious the consequence is if you make a mistake, you know?
Yeah, then you would put more time and effort into getting refined numbers and the like. I think there's a level of that to everything, but yeah, I think the idea here is being that we're scientifically trained in our heads, we tend to want to get the one complete answer, and we need to be more biased towards the idea of that's good enough, right? Good enough is so tough, right? The idea of that's good enough, let's go forward. I mean, no, there's always better, and you're in my I can always make it better. I can always make it better.
You can, but here's the thing though. Here's the trap, because I want to do that too, because I think we're both analytical thinkers. Because the biggest fear of an analyst, at least in my case, is being wrong. So I'm like, if I just spend more time. But here's the problem with that is I'm not smart enough to think of all the possibilities. So I'm like, let's just go ahead and run the experiment. It's gonna fail. And it's like, oh my God, I never thought of that. Like the bridge example. They probably never thought of that. Now,
Yeah.
if they waited to control every single variable, that bridge would never have been built, you know?
But what would you hope? And so I don't know where construction science was at that point, right?
Yeah, right.
Maybe that was the time when that would have been learned, or maybe there hadn't been enough scenarios where you were in an area where the wind blew so strong it caused harmonics in materials to play, right?
Yeah,
But the concept of hitting a harmonic that shook apart a building,
yeah.
that's pretty, I would say, pretty non-standard. You wouldn't think of that until kind of late in the process.
Well, and I'll tell you, I'll bet you they knew about harmonics, but they're like, oh, come on, that is such a rare case. You know, Yoda could come down with his lightsaber and cut it in two. It's like, okay, come
Well,
on. Yeah.
I'm assuming, okay, the wind has to blow at a certain rate, would set up a harmonic. The chances of the wind blowing at a consistent speed that would cause that harmonic are going to be low. They might have even thought about it and just written it off as a low
They
risk
probably did because
scenario.
they're like, it's just not. And I know there was another case of that where people were walking on the bridge, and when
Well,
they
that was the
walked,
one. So the video you see is he's walking down the center of the bridge. It's doing this, right? So it's kind of seesawing like this,
yeah,
and he is walking straight down the bridge because it also shows kind of how the center of the bridge is perfectly straight, even though the whole thing is shaking
yeah,
around.
yeah, because it's rotating around the central axis, right? But this case,
Yeah.
I think it was another bridge example where the harmonics were caused by people walking on it, not from the wind, actually.
Okay.
What's another
Yeah.
sharp?
So like when you're marching and everyone's in step, like quite often when you're marching across a bridge, you don't want to be in step.
Yeah, right. And that's the whole idea of the lady breaking the grass is she hits that certain harmonic or whatever like that. And then apparently, I can't remember what it was. I'm just going out, just making crap up at this point. But I think what they did is they changed something to dampen those certain harmonics. And then they just fixed it like super easy. I mean, it was like, oh, we just like bolted
Yeah,
stuff
I
on.
mean if you can alter the structural frequency of different parts of the bridge, that might do it.
Yeah, so let's talk about CNC machines, something practical for me.
You
What
want you
I'm,
want to see the video of the bridge, the
yeah, I
Culminating
do.
bridge?
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to take a quick second. I just got some text.
Okay, let me open this up real quick.
Okay, I'm good.
Are we watching a commercial? I don't know what this is.
Chris, I need
Um,
to. I'm gonna hit while you're pulling that up. I'm gonna take a quick pause. I've got
okay,
to use the restroom. Hang on. I'll be back.
alrighty.
All right.
All righty, let me share what I've called up here. Maybe. We'll see. All righty, here we go. All right, so this is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge video from 1940. Looks like it's from a movie. Look at that car.
Oh man.
And then it begins to tear itself apart.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I mean that's just friggin' crazy to me.
Yeah. That is crazy. Wow.
You know, and you know that's in civil engineering. You know, who would have thought that a bridge would have fallen apart like that?
Yeah, and my hunch is they probably would have known, but they just like it's just not going to happen. It's like it's just.
Well, it's probably some fringe theory, like, oh, that yeah, you might be able to do that, but you know, it's like the idea of sonic weapons.
Yeah.
Right, using sound on people to break their bones or whatever. You know, there's all these ideas that you could do all these different things. So.
And you probably some of them are true if they're implemented just right. You know, I mean,
Well, I think science shows that in theory you can make a sound wave that can cause damage and hit frequencies. You can get a sound wave that maybe even has physical force. You know, the idea of a like a microwave gun, like you cooking people's body part. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. Science says you can do it all.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're practical to build, that's a different thing entirely.
Yeah, and how much power do they? I mean, I think they might be getting close to being able to make like a lightsaber now. The problem is, how the hell are you going to power?
How do you stop the? How do you stop the end of the lightsaber?
I know that's the problem. That's one of the big problems.
Have you seen these EM guns?
No.
So I watched. I don't know why it was fed to me on some social media, but they basically have an electromagnetic gun. So it's like a railgun. Railgun uses magnets to pull a piece of metal and to launch it, right? And the railgun in old science fiction books was like a battleship gun. It was a big, massive gun. But they have them now that are the size of a rifle, kind of square and boxy looking, and they shoot little metal discs that get accelerated into several hundred miles an hour.
Yeah, cool.
And so no chemical propulsion, no shells, right? Relatively silent.
Yeah. Well, and think of that, because now all of a sudden you don't need the brass, you don't need the gunpowder. You can carry a soldier, depending on the size of the battery, could probably carry more ammo for the same weight, right?
Yeah.
Which is always better for a soldier.
Do you remember the Sherlock Holmes story? So in Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty was the bad guy, and I think Moriarty's right-hand man was Colonel. Starts with an M. I forgot his name. Moran, I think, was the guy's name, and he was an expert in air guns.
Oh, interesting.
And you and I think, I think air gun. I think of like the Japanese toy air guns, right? And I go, no. This was a compressed air rifle that he was able to do assassinations with, and of course, no sound comparatively.
Yeah, that's
compressed air is very powerful.
Very powerful, actually, because you think about. Yeah, I mean, my gosh, think of it in terms of hydraulics or compressed air or something. I mean, they lift cars with compressed air.
Well, I remember several years ago, there was a company, maybe it was Tata Motors in India. They were making a little golf cart sized car that ran off compressed air.
Oh, how interesting.
And you had a little compressor at home, you plugged it in overnight, it would charge up with compressed air, and you could go up to 30 miles an hour and like a 20-mile range.
Yeah.
Off compressed air. Right? And then I remember there's a company in New York, which I don't think I ever heard of it again, but they had gotten the rights to build a 4-seater family sedan that had a 1-gallon gas tank and an compressed air tank, and they would use the gas tank to superheat like a secondary air tank to where it was such a high pressure that the car could go 90 miles an hour and had like 1,000-mile range on a tank on 1 gallon of gas.
I have a hard time believing that. I'd like to see that
Well,
actually.
they were using the gas was used to make heat, and the heat
No,
was
I
used
understand.
to,
Yeah, the gas was used to
yeah.
power something else actually, but
Yeah.
that's
So the
interesting.
idea was compressed air was put into a secondary air chamber, which then had the pressure raised to such a high level that they could move a more powerful
So then let's
engine.
assume that's true for a second, right? Which I'm okay, we're just doing a thought experiment.
Sure.
That means then that an internally combustion engine gas, if that's true, is radically inefficient then.
But it is,
Like,
right? The
but
efficiency
crazy.
of I thought it was like 30% or less.
Well, yeah, but if you're talking about 20 or 30 miles a gallon towards 1,000, that's like, what's the factor difference in that? How many times does 30, let's say give them a benefit of doubt, 30, how many times does 30 go into 1,000?
See, the efficiency of an internal combustion engine, 11 to 27%, depending on the kind of vehicle
Okay, then I don't
and
buy the
size.
1,000, right? Because if you're saying 1,000, that means let's say an average car can do 30 miles a gallon. That's 33 times more effective, actually, which would yield a conversion of about 3% or so,
So
right?
my car right now gets 50 miles to the gallon.
50? What kind of car do you got?
I have a Hyundai Ioniq.
Okay, let's use 50. I think that's a high number.
It's on the high end, but it's an easy calculation to use. So to go 1,000 miles, I need 20 gallons.
Yeah, right,
Right. So
exactly.
you need on a car my size, you need to get 1 gallon of gas to produce the energy used for 20 gallons.
Which is 20 times more effective, right?
It's not 20 times more effective. It would be some number less than that because assuming you're getting, let's see, I don't know what kind of effectiveness can you get from burning gas? I guess that would be the other question, right? So, because there's an efficiency in the burning of the 1 gallon of gas, and there's an efficiency in the use of the 20 gallons of
Well,
gas.
no. This is the way I'm viewing it, right? So if it takes you 1 gallon to go 1,000 miles on this compressed air machine we're talking about, and it takes you 20 gallons to do 1,000 miles, I mean that's 20 times more effective, right? More efficient.
No, because what happens? It depends on how much energy you're. Let's say you on the 1 gallon you're getting 100% of the energy out of it, which you're not. But let's say you're getting 100% of the energy out of it, and out of the 20 gallons you're only getting 30% of the energy out of it. Then you're only comparing it to 6 gallons of full energy, right? Because
Well,
because you're wasting a lot of the energy on my combustion engine as heat. Let's say you only get 30% of the energy from the 20 gallons is used to actually get mileage.
now hang on. So I'm not talking about that. I think you're adding another factor in. Before we go there, if it takes you so what you're saying is it takes you 20 gallons to go 1,000 miles in your car,
Yeah,
right?
20 gallons of
Another
gasoline.
theoretical car we're talking about can go 1,000 miles with 1 gallon, right?
That's what they say.
So let's assume that's true. I kind of doubt it, but let's assume it's true. That means that second option is 20 times more efficient than option number one because I use 20 times less gas.
I would say it's closer to. It depends on how efficiently it's using the gas. I would say it's less than 20, but probably more than 6 or 7. Between 6 and 20%.
See, I
6 and
don't know how
20.
you get that though, because if you go 1,000 on one and it takes you
Because
20,
then you're assuming the same efficiency out of a gallon of gas.
no,
Their
I'm not assuming
technology.
the efficiency.
It,
I'm not assuming that. I'm just assuming it takes me 20 gallons to go 1,000 miles. Example one. Example two, it takes me 1 gallon to go 1,000 miles. The second example is 20 times more efficient than the first example. I'm not talking about the extraction coming out of the gas.
I don't think you can avoid the extraction coming out of the gas because that's
Well,
the
you certainly
technology you're
can.
talking
I'm
about.
just comparing one to the other. One's 20 times more efficient than the other one.
Yeah, so that's not how I would measure efficiency, but okay.
Then how would you do? I don't understand how you could get any other answer.
So in my mind, the way it works is how many calories of output, how many what is joules of energy are being used to move the car.
Yeah, but that's not the example is how far can you go with a certain amount of gallons of gas, right?
But that's what the joules equate to. How many joules of energy does it take for me to move?
See, that depends on how efficiency the conversion is or whatever. All I'm doing is I'm comparing option one to option two. Option 2 is 20 times more efficient or more effective than option 1. That's all I'm saying.
It's 20 times more efficient in gas consumption.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I'll say
Yeah.
I'll let you say have that, but I won't talk about efficiency because I think efficiency actually has to do with the technology you're using to burn and how much energy you're getting out of the gas tank.
Hang on a second. This is the typical equivocation problem we always run into. Actually.
Yeah. Well, so in my mind, the way it works is how much energy does it take to move a car from point A to point B, right? Am I measuring the amount lost? Or because if I say the efficiency of the gas burning car is 30%, it uses 30% of the energy. That means that of the 20 gallons of gasoline, only 6 gallons were actually applied
well,
towards
I don't
moving
know.
the
You
car.
didn't give that in anything. All the data we have is for in your car.
30%. No, I said 11 to 27% efficiency.
Yeah, but
for a
that's
gas
not
burning
the
car.
example, right? I'm going to simplify. I'm going to throw that away because I don't need to think about that right now. I need to think about. You said
But you're
it takes.
trying to apply it to a scientific viewpoint. You're trying to say it's unlikely that a car can do that, and I'm saying you're not measuring the right thing to make that. I think your point is still valid, but I think the idea is it's not as far as you're thinking it is. It's not as far-fetched as you think it is.
Well, I haven't got to that part yet. I think you're just a step ahead of me, actually.
Okay.
Right now, I'm just all the data we have, right? This is all the data you've given me is that your car, 20 gallons goes 1,000 miles, right? Data point one.
Yeah.
Second example, car 2, 1 gallon goes 1,000 miles.
With
so
air, yes.
Car 1, I don't even care the technique at this point. It's irrelevant, actually. All you give me is how much gas does it take. So then that means car 2 is 20 times more effective at using that fuel than
fuel efficient. Fuel efficient, we'll say.
Yeah, that's all we know, right? Now you want to go another step, and you want to say, what's the theoretical I think this is where you're going. Let me be very clear. You're now wanting to do what's the theoretical maximum amount of energy that could be extracted from a gallon of gasoline. Is that where you're going?
No, I think you need to figure out how much energy is being used from that gallon of gasoline to really make a comparison, because one is driven by the explosive energy coming out of the gasoline, right? The combustion engine. The other is driven by air. It's air pressure that's actually giving you the ability to do work. So some of that compressed air goes into the compressor at home that fills that air tank. That's energy too. Some of the air, some of it, yeah. So when you look at the actual amount of work done, how can it be possible? It's possible because not all of the power is measured in the 1 gallon of gas.
Okay, that totally makes sense, because I was making the assumption that it's exactly, you put 1 gallon in this case, and in the other case you get with nothing else.
So that's why I'm saying I can't compare them that way, because the technology is not the same. So the amount of efficiency it gets out of that 1 gallon of gas can't be measured against the other, because they're not the same engine.
Because there's other energy being put in.
Yes.
In addition to that 1 gallon of gas. Oh yeah. My argument breaks down in that case. I was assuming the only energy in was 1 versus 20.
No.
Yeah. Okay. If that's true, then it's definitely 20 times more efficient.
Yeah, assuming you can go that distance off. Yeah, and then we start getting into the weight of the car. So how much actual energy does it need to move? All that kind of crap, right?
Yeah. Well, in this case, typically what you do is you say all the variables are the same except for this thing. So in that particular case, now you got to factor in the weight, the wind. I mean, there's the weather. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff to factor in.
There's a car made in San Diego called the Aptera. I don't know if it's gone into production yet, and it's a 4-wheeled car, or is it a 3-wheeled car? And it's got wider in the front, and it's got two wheels side by side in the back. It looks like a giant teardrop. It looks high tech. It looks like something from the future. It used to be $25,000. I don't know how many they've actually made as of yet, because they haven't gone into production last time I checked. But $25,000, and it's an electric car. And because of the way it's shaped, it's aerodynamic. It gets rid of like 80% of the drag that a normal car has. So it will go. If you get the max battery on it, it will go 1,000 miles on one charge. Not only that, you can get solar panels on it, and if you live in Southern California and you drive no more than 30 miles a day, you never need to plug it in, and it will be charged all the time.
Yeah, because you think about the pure physics of that. So really then, there's a certain amount of energy that's separate. There's like two energies I think of. One is how much does it take to accelerate from 0 to whatever speed you're talking about. There's a certain
Mhm.
amount of energy. And then once you get to that speed, the only thing you need to overcome at that point is just drag. That's all you need to overcome.
Yep.
Because if an object can accelerate at this point, then you're going to get dragged from the tires and you're going to get dragged from the air is the significant one. So if you reduce your drag aerodynamically, yeah, that you get a radical increase in distance you can go.
This is the car.
Oh, look at the fairings on the wheels. They're designed to reduce
Yep.
drag.
The other thing about this car is it's all open source. You can get all the parts and you can print them on your 3D printer. So if you damage a car, you can print the part and replace it yourself. They're not trying to build an ecosystem of dealers and mechanics, right?
Yeah.
And so it's solar. The entire car with the battery and everything weighs less than just the battery on an F-150 electric.
Yeah, because when you start accelerating from 0 to whatever speed you want to go, how much mass is there? You can directly calculate how much energy it's going to take.
Now, I wouldn't want to be in an accident in this car, but the idea is interesting.
The idea is very, very interesting. Like, this is kind of cool. So this is really, and we need to talk about how we argue at some point, because we need to make sure that we lay all the constraints out there and that nothing is.
I tend to come at an argument before all the constraints are laid out, and I like to add constraints as we argue. And I think you want to have all the constraints in place first. That's the impression I get.
Well, no, that's exactly, I think that's exactly right. So my argument for my technique is that, well, how do you expect me to predict if we don't put all the constraints in, right?
And I'm going for the best outcome of our argument, which means I can't put constraints in until we agree on what those constraints are.
Well, then it sounds like that if we want to discuss something, the first step is I'm going to start asking, what constraints are you using?
But I think a lot of those get sussed out as we talk. And that's why I quite often when you say something, you get angry that I changed the problem. I'm like, no, I haven't yet defined the problem in my mind. So as we talk, okay, so let's throw that constraint in there. Okay, let's throw that constraint in there. And that's where I'm coming from. It's like, to me, we haven't officially defined the problem until we've talked about it.
Well, then that's a good thing to know, because that's exactly, and it frustrates the heck out of me, actually, because it feels like you're trying to just weasel out of stuff, is the way it makes me feel, right?
Mm-hmm. So and quite often I'll state something like, this is the way it looks to me. And I'm not set 100% that this is the way it is, but this is like on first pass, this is the way it looks. And you'll ask something, go, okay, no, so now this is the way it looks to me, right? And I'll change on the fly because as you point out something, or we come to an agreement on something, or I change my thinking on something, then I have to reassess everything.
Well, then
I'm not stuck with an opinion that I can't change. I can change my opinion like that.
Well, I know you can, but it's frustrating for the other person. So what I'm going to do in the future is no, we're not going to talk about the problem. Right now, the task is to define the constraints of the problem first.
But I think the way my mind works is we need to delve into the problem a bit to flesh out those constraints.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, that's okay. Fine. I can do that. Because that's for me, that's a completely different problem.
So, you talked about last time, a big part of problem solving is problem identification.
Yeah, defining what is the problem. Right, exactly.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, it used to piss me off a lot in meetings when people would say, wait, what are we trying to solve here? Right? But right. Sometimes you need to ask that question because the tangents that people go on start getting people to think about things in a certain way that may not be relevant towards the end goal.
Yeah, well, and that happened. So I used to be part of this executive coaching program called Vistage. I don't know if you've heard of it or not. It's like $1,500 a month or whatever. And then every once in a while, there's 12 dudes that get together and they bring up a problem. And then we're supposed to solve the problem. I will tell you, Chris, let's say it took an hour to solve the problem. The first 50 minutes were actually trying to determine if that was the actual problem. Defining the problem was the first 15 minutes. And almost invariably what happened is once you clearly defined the problem, the solution was, we didn't even need to talk about it most of the time. It was just like, of course, that's the answer, you know?
But I think that's the big thing. Like one thing that came to my mind was, if you go to a company and say, what's your strategic goal? We want to increase sales by 50% this year.
Okay, fine.
Okay? Why?
Well, now that with the why, that's a different thing, right?
But the why, see, they've already, let's say even to go specific, we want to put in systems that will allow us to increase sales by 50% this year.
Okay,
They've already
fine.
solutioned it for you. The solution
Fine.
is to put in a system. And now you ask why. And the question is, well, we notice that our sales are going down, and we want to be able to have more sales, and we're going to put in a system that can handle it by being more efficient. I'm like, so you've already made the decision that you need to be more efficient, that the sales are going down. You've already figured out the reasons the sales are going down, and you've come up with a solution. Well, no, we just thought this would work. I'm like, okay, so why are the sales going down? Maybe the quality of your product is gone. Maybe there's no market anymore. Maybe your sales team took a hit, and I don't know what the reasons are, but to know why you want to do something is important. And then to understand, then to go to the basics and figure out, what is the source of our pain point, right?
Well,
that's hard to do.
I think that's very good, but a good engineer typically doesn't ask why. He just says, I want to double my sales. Okay, got it. We're going to double your sales. Right? So that's the problem. And he'll go off and work on that problem, actually. I think it's very smart to ask why.
It may turn out that all you needed to do was improve quality control of your product, and sales would have gone up. That may have been the answer.
Well, that's a different problem.
It's a different problem, exactly. So the question is, when you've got a solution that you want to do, so my goal is to increase sales, and we're going to do it by starting an initiative to put in new systems and improve our processes. Well, that's great, and it sounds great, and it makes perfect sense to anyone listening to it. But it doesn't mean you've done a proper root cause analysis to understand what's happening here.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I think that's a good question, because that can save a lot of time. I heard a story from Navy SEALs talking about it. They were like getting a building and attacking it, and the guy's like, you guys were awesome, and it was super speed, and the way you handled it and the way you did all this stuff tactically was 100% right on. The only problem I see is you went to the wrong building. But great job,
So, the what was it? Elon Musk or Doge or one of those things said that they found a computer system. I want to say it was in Social Security. It was in one of the groups where they were going to pay some dollar amount, $6 million, $7 million for the system. And it's 8 years out past its due date. And they've spent like $60 or $70 million. So they're over budget by like 800%.
Yeah.
Right. And you, as a person who doesn't know how the government works and who doesn't know how businesses work and how this happens, wow, that sounds like a waste of money. Wow, it sounds like the consultant screwing him over. Wow, it sounds like whatever. I'm like, no, this is government. This is the way government works. Yeah. And I remember talking to a guy who I used to work with. He was in the government, and he said the FBI at one point had tried, because he was in the FBI, had wanted to build a system. So they spent the money. It was $100 and some odd million for the system. So they spent the money. And then it was $35 million for the system. By the time they were done, it was $100 and some odd million. And what would happen is the next person in charge of the system would come in and say, okay, we're going to do blank, 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 and blank. Okay, so we want to change the color of this button from blue to red.
Yeah.
That's a change order. We got to go back and figure out what's impacted. We got to do an assessment. Then we got to figure out get an approval for it, all that kind of stuff. So that change you want to do is going to cost $500,000 to change the color of a button. It's stupid, but the processors are there for a reason. Yeah. So you got to give up on wanting everything the way you want it exactly, and you've got to learn to compromise on things to get to an end product. This is where the Agile methodology makes so much sense. Right? It's like, we're not going to give you perfection at this point. We're going to give you something workable. And the next iteration, we'll try to figure out how to make it a little bit better. And we'll make it a little bit better.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The waterfall approach is of everything's going to be done in one go, and then we'll have the next big release in 2 years or whatever. That it's easy to understand. It's much less valuable and useful to teams to have.
Well, no, we actually agree on that, because that's one thing like we fail on, is that we need to bias towards action even if it's not right. because of the reason that we're not smart enough to be able to predict what the environment's going to be in 2 years. Now, if we were, no doubt, let's get all the data and let's do one move and we'll be right there. But we're just not smart enough. We don't understand that we could have this harmonic vibration in the bridge that'll make it fall down. We're just not smart enough to be able to predict that.
Mm-hmm. It's and the idea also, was it an object in motion stays in motion, right? So once you're in motion, it's easier to stay in motion than it is to start later on.
Well, and this is one of the reason, like the F-35 program is so over budget, because there's so many people that are so involved in it. It's like, and it's kind of a little bit of a disaster. I mean, the plane's cool, but it's kind of a disaster from a spending standpoint. But it's like it's the old theory, like, look, we're so far into it now, we don't even have the option to reverse and back out, right? Because what are we going to do?
That's the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes, I know.
Is it true, or is it just their excuse?
Well, it could be the excuse, but it's also very true from a political standpoint. Now, if we scrap that thing, well, wait a minute. Like, you spent all this money and you're scrapping the damn thing? I mean, how come you didn't figure it out?
Is it true from a defense standpoint? Like it's the only up-to-date plane that we've got, and we need to have it no matter what?
But I do know it's not always just the pure technical solution. There's environmental, there's pride, there's ego, there's all sorts of other stuff involved in these decisions,
Because I remember, so I had a friend who was into military history back in college, and there was we played a couple of role-playing games where there was like a military background for these things, and I remember when the setting was in Europe, they had like certain weapons you could have, like a German G3 assault rifle, which was a standard assault rifle. I don't remember if it's 5.62 or 5.56 or 7.62. I don't remember which one it is, but it's a typical rifle, right? But then they had what's called the German G11, which was a caseless ammo. So your magazine could hold 60, I think, rounds with no shells.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was a hard propellant was a hard chemical propellant, and the way it was designed was it loaded up, and then the thing would tilt, and then it would shoot out the barrel, and then it would go, and then the next one and it did it at speed. So it was an interesting idea, and Germans it was an actual weapon that they made all of, I think, 11 or 12 actual prototypes of, because it was just too hard to get to work. And I mean, the idea was supposed to be caseless ammo. You never had to touch rounds, right? You just dealt with magazines. Dirt couldn't get in it, all that kind of stuff. And they couldn't make it work. And I forgot how much they spent a huge amount of money on that.
Yeah. This is like one of those cases, like, man, on paper, it's a genius idea, but it just won't fly. It just starts too sensitive, or it's too this. It's just not practical.
So, one of the guys I've been listening to on YouTube recently is this guy. I think his name is Gary Stevenson. Have you heard of this guy?
Mm-mm.
He's a British guy. He's very much he comes from the lower classes originally, but then he became a trader and made millions of dollars or millions of pounds. And now he basically rails against the system and how rigged it is for rich people, right? He claims he's one of the rich people, so he admits it. But yeah, I mean, he was talking about, some things look great on paper, but in reality, that's not true. So economists, again, economy is one of those things that became a science. Let's find out the math that explains what's going on with the economy. And he's like, you got to go out and talk to individuals. You got to talk to the guy who's working at McDonald's. You got to talk to the person who's shopping at Walmart. You've got to talk to these people to really understand what's going on with the economy, because that is the economy, right? These things you see on paper, these calculations you do, these things you learn as an economist in school are not the real economy. And so, so what's on paper is not real. It's what do we call it? The ivory tower is what we call a lot of the academics. They live in an ivory tower. It's like the teacher. It's the business teacher who never ran a business, right? It's the same idea. So I think
yes.
We're at a point where we need to get out of our heads, which is where academia is, and we need to get into reality.
Well, and this is interesting. So Dave Ramsey does this sort of thing. He teaches you how to get out of debt, right? And there's a lot of people rail on Dave Ramsey because of the techniques he used. Because that's not, the math is not optimal. And he's like, no, the math is not optimal, actually. And he explained his way. He said, listen, I'm trying to get you out of debt. I'm not trying to teach you how to manage interest rates, right? By rolling a loan over to no interest thing. What I'm trying to change is your behavior. Your behavior is you have impulse control problems, right? And so that's why he says take the smallest one, regardless of interest rate, and pay that off. So now it's a feedback. It's like you're getting some motivation. And he goes, that's why my system works. But mathematically, you're right. It doesn't make any sense. Which is interesting, because this is I think a really important something I'm just learning right now. When you build a solution, it's not the optimal solution that's the most important. It's the solution closest to the optimal one that you can implement reliable. That's the best answer.
That is the best answer, and the problem is you can always get a little bit closer to the optimum with a little more effort. At what point is that little more effort not worth it?
Yeah, like if we're trying to lose weight, right? I mean, I'm sure somebody could tell us the optimal diet. You do exactly this at this time, and you have your optimal weight loss.
I think we're going to get there. I think we're going to get in the next 10 years the ability to actually tell you what specifically to eat, and maybe even get to the point to tell you specifically what brand or because the quality of the food you buy. You buy meat from one part of the country, from meat that's grass fed versus grain fed. You buy soda that uses sugar versus cane sugar versus corn syrup. Yeah, they're both sweeteners, and the industry will make you think the same thing, but your body may not react the same to corn syrup as it does to sugar.
No.
So knowing that about your body, and I think that'll be built off a variety of things. It'll be built off some kind of a gut biome test that we do.
Yeah,
it'll be built off of your Oura Ring and your Apple Watch and your CGM. It'll be built off of knowing your family history. What did your family die of? When did they die? And then also your genetics. Where are your genetics from? What country? You've heard about eating the diet of wherever your DNA is. So like if you're Scandinavian, you can eat a certain diet better than other people can. All that gets going to mix together, and then you'll be able to get actual customized to you diet plans.
Well, and that's the idea. That's the idea of the whole COVID vaccine, was that it may not be optimized to a particular individual. It's designed to optimize the group, right?
It's the population. Vaccines are not about the individual. They're about the population.
Yeah, which the idea, though, is that's why you go to a personalized doctor that based on your scenario, he's going to prescribe the best answer for you, right? Not for the group.
So I went to the doctor yesterday, right? And my blood sugar's a little bit better. My blood pressure's down. But they offered me Ozempic, and they said, do I want Ozempic? And I'm like, I don't know. I want Ozempic.
You don't know, and it's interesting. So Dr. Mike talks about this, and he breaks a lot of the stuff like seed. He's like, seed oils aren't as bad as everybody makes them out to be. Some people think seed oils are just like from the devil and you should never have them. He's like, it doesn't really make
that's this thing. They're going over here.
But that's his opinion, right? His opinion is, I'm telling you, it's one thing that's the real problem, and it's genetic. Is just how much food drive do you have? Because some people just want to eat more than other people do. And he goes, I'm telling you, that's 95% of the problem.
I will sit there and not be hungry. I'll have a heavy protein meal with a lot of meat, and it'll be 6 hours later, which when I should be eating.
Yeah.
And I'm not hungry, and yet I want to eat.
Yeah, so you have that mental. You're like, I want to eat. Yes, exactly.
Yes, so I want to smell something. I want to taste something. I want to chew something. I want to swallow. I want to feel my gut being filled up. I mean, all those things.
Yeah, exactly. So I got two cats. I'll tell you the story of two cats. One cat, his name is Dudley, and the frickin' cat, man, just wants to eat non-stop. That's all he wants to do is eat. He'll go finish the other cat food. He sits in bags when we're eating. I mean, that's all he wants to do is eat. And then we had another cat, which has passed away. His name was Murphy. And Murphy could care less about food. I mean, he ate a little bit. You want to treat Murphy? Not interested. Just not interested in food. I mean, they just had fundamental different food drives.
Is Dudley fatter?
No, Dudley's in really great shape, actually.
So maybe he needs it. That's the other thing. Like we talked about, your body needs what it needs, and animals seem to know, and babies seem to know. So maybe he needs it.
And he's a youngin. He's a youngin, but man, he just is obsessed with eating.
But
Actually,
also, he was a stray, right? Originally.
yeah, they're all our cats are strays. We just
Okay.
collect them.
I was wondering if that could have an impact, right? If you grow up hungry, you might you might store food.
But he looks really good. I mean, I don't think he's too skinny, but man, he's a very fit little cat, you know. So, and I'm like, I don't understand how you eat. So he literally eats. I kid you not, Chris, at least 2 to 3 times as much as the other cats. And he's probably the thinnest cat here, actually. And I don't know, maybe he's the youngest one. I don't know, but
That's probably part of it, but also, it occurred to me like your body is designed to save fat for times of famine,
yeah, right.
right? Before we had mass production of all this food, before we had refrigeration, before we had all of that, particularly if you were living in non-tropical climates, you didn't have an abundance of food all
Yeah,
year.
right.
So your body got good at burning fat, at burning carbs, at eating carbs. When you were in the wild and you found a beehive that with honey in it, you probably gorged on honey, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, no, I doubt. And people that grew up like that or on a farm or something like that, they're probably moving all the time. They're constantly moving, working, where we just sit on our ass on the couch or the chair most of the
yeah.
day.
So we talk about our BMR, being what, 2,000 calories, 700, 1,800 calories,
Yeah.
whatever a day. I really wonder what the BMR of someone from 5,000 years ago was.
I would assume they're walking and working and moving. I mean, I know in other countries actually, it's not uncommon for people to be walking 5, 10 miles a day, just walking. That's just what they do. They just walk around a lot, you know?
Is that part of our problem? Is the fact that all of our food is calorie dense. It's
Yes.
designed for us to want to eat it.
Yes.
Culturally, probably over thousands of years, we did eat a lot, probably because we burned a lot.
Yeah,
And that
right.
stuck around, and it just happens to all hit us. I think the food industrialization, the mass production of processed foods, is probably the number one reason why, because the calorie density just got huge.
Well, and it's really freaking tasty. It tastes really good, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, you look at mayonnaise. I guess that's been around for hundreds of years, technically, but you look at this sheer amount of calories in mayonnaise.
What's a fat? Mostly fat, right? What is it? Oil and eggs, basically, right?
Oil and
Emulsifies.
eggs. Yeah, oil and eggs.
Yeah, it's protein and fat, which is not bad in itself, but if you eat too much, it's just
Well, if you eat that with carbs,
yeah,
then you're kind of just
it's
right?
not the best combo. And fruit,
No.
people say fruit, but it's the fruit we have now is not the same as the fruit we had 50 years
It's
ago.
bigger and sweeter.
Bigger and sweeter, yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that, I think that drives us because not only is food energy, it's calories, but food is also information in a sense. It literally changes things. And it's like you eat really tasty food, you want to eat more really tasty food.
Yeah, but yeah, so a lot of it's also environment. I've told you, like when I get in the car and I'm driving around by myself to go to do a
Yeah.
doctor's appointment or go shopping or something like that. I was on my way to Home Depot this week, and I'm looking at the Del Taco and the Taco Bell as I drive by, going, oh, I could just stop there and grab something. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
it's so easy.
and so suddenly I was craving whatever taco or whatever at the time. And I'm like, why am I craving this? I didn't even think about it till I saw it.
Yeah. I think it's a habit, right? It goes back to atomic habits. It's like, it's just your habit. You're just used to that.
Well, one thing I remember years ago when I lived in Japan, my dad came to visit, and we did a motorcycle trip around parts of Japan. And one of the 4 islands in Japan is very country compared to the rest, right? They don't have stores that stay open after 9 o'clock, that sort of thing, right? I mean, everything's closed. Most things close at 6. And I remember thinking to myself, this would be a really hard place to snack at night,
Yeah, right.
right? Because there's no fast food. It's not open late at night. So
Yeah.
just by, the sheer availability of businesses that we have dictate our ability to fulfill all our desires
Oh, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
right? I remember when we visited Germany in most places still has everything closed on Sunday.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, everything closed on Sunday is a common thing in a lot of European countries. So, like, we're not used to that. So we tend to go pick up food at the grocery store and eat it back at the hotel. And it's like, oh, it's Sunday. There's only one grocery store in all of Munich that's open.
Yeah.
So,
Which is a big point. I mean, I'm kind of a big, I'm believing more and more in this atomic habits concept. Is if you want to change your behavior, change your environment, because your environment dictates your behavior significantly.
Then there's no willpower question involved, right? If you give me two things that I love and tell me to pick one, I'm going to have a hard time with that, and there's going to be willpower. Or if you're going to say I have to make a decision not to do this bad thing for me that tastes really good or whatever, that's tough. That's a lot of willpower. If only from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. do I have that choice, and it's currently 10 p.m., guess what? I don't have a choice. You took away the choice for half the day from me. That just by doing that.
And then you're like, okay, I guess it's just where it is. I guess I'll just eat in the morning. And you're like, okay, that's fine or whatever. But man, imagine going. I know my dad grew up on a farm. Very hard life, actually. I know they used to have a lot of rice and beans, and that was kind of it. A little bit of meat every once in a while. But fruit was very scarce. I mean, it would be like he said, maybe at Christmas or a couple times a year, you get like an apple or a banana, and that was it. That was a treat. Every once in a while when you went into town, like twice a month or something, you would get maybe one piece of hard candy.
And who back then would take apples and juice them? And who back then would take, and throw away, the bulk of the product? I watch a lot of English TV shows, and All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot, right? It's a great show. It's 1940, World War II. So World War One? I think it's World War II. Anyways, I think it's 1930s England. And, the kids, at Christmas, they got an orange.
Yeah.
You think about that. In England, where are oranges from? You're going to bring oranges to England. So that's going to be an expensive thing to bring in.
Yeah.
And so that was their Christmas gift, was an orange.
That sounds like my dad's experience. Yeah, it was just, yeah. They're just wanting a lot. And he actually worked. I mean, literally on the farm. I mean, you work for like 8 or 10 hours a day.
That's why you had kids in the first place, right?
Well, yeah, it's your labor force, right? And you don't have all these labor laws and everything. It was kind of crazy growing up, I mean, for him, because there was a lot of physical abuse going on. I mean, if you didn't do what your dad said, I mean, he'd beat the shit out of you, right? Or throw something at you or whatever. I mean,
oh, yeah, we would call that toxic masculinity today, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I remember one time, this is going to be a great little short if AI picks this up, actually. I remember I was traumatized. So I'd come back to Arkansas like every year, and he lived kind of on a farm by a lake and whatever. He had a bunch of dogs, actually. And I remember like a dog growled at him one time and made an aggressive move. So what he did is he went in his house, got the gun, and killed the frickin' dog right there on the spot. I mean, it's just a different...
Well, dogs are not pets.
Yeah, it's a different relationship.
Or let's change that. Dogs are not family members in those scenarios.
Yeah, and he lived a hard life, and he was like a hard man. I mean, he had tremendous stress, like a wife and 6 kids to feed, and grew up as a sharecropper with very little money. I mean, he was a grumpy old guy.
I remember in college, one of my friends invited us invited a group of us to visit his house, and it was actually not their house, it was their farm, their ranch. And apparently the dad had a ranch, and we all went there with the intent of playing role-playing games for the weekend or whatever. Dad had an idea that we were going to help out on the farm.
Yeah.
So he comes in the middle of us playing role-playing games. He throws a dead rat on the table, and there's blood coming out of its mouth. Because you guys are supposed to be out catching these and doing stuff, and we were supposed to help geld the horses. And we're like, what?
Yeah, farm life is hard, man. I mean, those guys work. I mean, they typically get up usually before sunrise or right at sunrise, and they work like all day long. They're working.
And that's where the idea of, breakfast is the most important day comes in, because you need to fuel your energy for the day.
Yeah.
Right. Today we I can skip breakfast, or I can do intermittent fasting or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, because you don't go out there and use your body that way.
Yeah, right. I remember I went to Cuba. This was 20 years ago, and I wasn't hugely overweight, but I was a little extra weight. I mean, and in Cuba you just walk a lot. I literally came back, I lost 12 pounds just from a week in Cuba. And I was eating whatever I wanted to, drinking like a fish, doing whatever I wanted. I still lost 12 pounds because we're just walking miles every day.
I mean, we talk about how, in poorer countries, if you don't have money to eat, or if you don't have much money to eat, the food you're eating is probably not processed. You're getting veggies
Yeah.
off from the farm.
Yeah.
You're getting stuff that probably is relatively healthy. Whereas in the
Yeah.
United States, if you don't have much money to eat, you're buying the unhealthy food because that's the cheap
I
food,
know. You can go to
right?
Taco Bell or Del Taco for $4 and you can get a
Yeah.
bunch of this and a bunch of
Or if
that.
I want to buy cheap food at the grocery store, the stuff that I buy that's cheap is got all of the processed ingredients in it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It doesn't have corn; it has some kind of corn byproduct that's
Yeah.
produced, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's problematic. And that's one of the things where I would like to see what Kennedy does in his role, because that to me, I would love to see the the food industry here undergo some principal changes in the
Yeah,
value
whether he's going
structure.
to attack a big industry like that, who knows? I mean,
It's going
I
to be
hear
tough to say because the Republicans tend to be big industry, right? So
he's talking a lot, but who knows if that's actually going to happen? I mean,
yeah, well, and then of course,
I do like his thought process. He's like, let's go after the root cause of this. Let's just make our food better, which I do like that part.
yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that. He's actually approaching things from the critical thought aspect that I would want him to.
Mhm.
I feel there's bias in the way, but to I don't have enough to know to say that emphatically. That's just kind of
Well,
the feeling I
what
have.
part don't you like, or what part do you think he's not doing? I don't know much about him, but
Um, I feel like he's coming from a viewpoint on, and I know we'll get flack for this because some people say, yeah, we'll say that he's never said this, but I think he's coming from a relatively negative viewpoint on vaccines as a whole. Whereas I come from a relatively positive viewpoint on vaccines as a whole.
yeah,
Not on the individual, this is a good vaccine, but on the science behind the idea. What is a vaccine and what does it do?
yeah, he's got a lot of.
And and what I feel is whether he says this or not, what's being heard by the populace is that vaccines are not good. And so people then they don't understand that the science is fine, it's the implementation that's crap, right?
Yeah, that's a different thing.
And that's where I'm at. I'm like, you can tell me that individual vaccines are problematic. And I'll say, yeah, maybe that's because of the politics, maybe that's because of the industry, the pharmaceutical company, whatever it is, right? I can understand that. But I don't question the logic of the science of it. And that's where I feel people are coming out of his conversations thinking that that's the problem. The science of vaccines is the problem. And so that's where I'm worried.
Well, and then also too, it's like everybody lumps them all together. It's like we call them vaccines as a whole group, whether they're good or bad. And I think they need to be evaluated individually.
Well, they are evaluated individually. The problem is there's no objective standard.
Yeah.
That's one thing. When I delved into it, I was saying, so what is the objective standard for a vaccine to be approved by the FDA for use? And they said it
So,
depends.
so then let me it depends. Yeah, it depends on who's funding the study. But so let's talk about vaccine. And I guess it depends if you want to optimize for society as a whole or for the individual. So at one point, if you're optimizing for the society as a whole, it might be better. Oh boy, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. So this is a thought experiment. But what if you killed all the vaccines and then just let disease run its natural course and thin the herd that only the strong would survive? I mean, would over time that yield to a stronger society?
Yes, but
Yes,
the
but always
question
yes.
is, all you need is one of them that we can't adapt to fast enough. That's all you need is one vaccine we can't adapt to fast enough, and it'll run through enough of the population. It'll do so much damage to the population
But
that
what's the worst case scenario? Let's say Ebola came by or something that kills people a lot. I mean, how many people would it kill? A third? Would it kill half? I mean, how many people would it kill? I mean, it wouldn't
well,
kill everybody, right?
so
Bubonic.
bubonic plague, right?
Yeah,
What did that kill? 30%?
I think so. Yeah, which was horrible, right? But still, that means 70% of people lived. And then, would it be true then in that case? Is this
40 to
true?
70%. It's Colin Powell's rule. 40 to 70%.
It killed or are left alive?
Estimated death rate.
Estimated
Untreated death rate, 40 to 70%.
Okay, let's just call it half. Just go in the middle
Okay.
somewhere. Just call it half. So then, would those half that survived, could they ever get bubonic plague again, or would they be perfectly immune from it forever?
I think they can't they?
I don't know. I'm asking the question.
I don't
I don't
know.
know the answer. Because if it's true that they never would get it, that they're just GNA said that's not going to
I
mess
mean,
with.
it's the idea that you want to expose your kids to as many diseases as possible. So by the time that I mean, that the whole idea of a vaccine for kids is you expose them to some version of a weak version of a disease when they're young. So all you're doing is saying we're just going to expose them to the real disease instead of the weak disease.
Yeah, but what they do, Chris, typically, at least the old style vaccines, they would deactivate that particular virus or bacteria, so it wouldn't do any harm, but their body would see it as, oh my gosh, I got to build defenses against thing, and they actually wouldn't get sick. And so now their body's immune from that particular disease. I mean, that's the overall strategy, right?
Bubonic plague, unlikely to get it again.
Unlikely. So then,
if they say it's theoretically possible to get it a second time, but it's unlikely.
But unlikely. But there's no doubt. There's no question then. Like, let's say half the people died, half the people lived. Let's focus on the half of the people that lived. If that came through again, it definitely would not wipe out hype. Let's say it wipes out 10% or something. So over time, you'd become immune to that. The population.
Do we know if it runs through population through children, or is it every generation has to have
I don't know. I'm just thinking from a very high level thought.
Because if you kill half the people this generation, and the next generation you kill half the people, I think you're going to end up losing people faster than replenishment rate.
Well, that's that. It'd be nice to
if every 12 years you have the plague and kill half the people.
Well, no, I don't think you'd kill half the people, because you just said that the chance of getting somebody that's immune from it, getting them again, is very unlikely. So you wouldn't wipe out 50% again of the 50%, right? You might wipe out a tiny percentage of that 50%.
Okay, so you're saying those guys will survive. The next batch of people, 50% of them survive. The next batch of people, 50% of them survive. So you're saying over time the next batch of people, the next group of kids that come along, right? Because they haven't been exposed to the plague. So they're going to get exposed to it.
No, I don't think so, because their genetics would predispose them to being.
Why?
So well, no, because
the way your system works is it learns to fight a specific disease. That doesn't mean that you're going to inherit the ability to defend against that disease.
Well, how do you know? I'm assuming that's true. So we need to actually do some research.
So the way most vaccines work is they expose you to a disease, and your body builds the ability to fight that disease. If your body's never been exposed to that disease, it won't know how to fight that disease. So that's the whole purpose of the vaccine and the inoculation, is to expose you to it.
Okay, I got that. Let's go back though. So let's say it runs through the whole society and 50% of people live. So there's something genetically, their DNA makes them more resistant to that than the other group, right?
Not necessarily.
Well, then why did they live then?
Maybe something they ate. Maybe it could be genetics. It could be something in their environment. It could be that they bathed more often than the other ones. There's a variety of reasons of why it could be. It could just be sheer chance that they got the strain that was stronger than some other strain.
Okay, so
theirs came from a specific rat versus that rat over there. Maybe Norwegian rats were worse than whatever rats. I don't know.
If it's not wholly attributed to just their DNA, then my argument completely breaks down.
Yeah, so I think the idea would be that most diseases that we're talking about, I mean, why do we keep vaccinating kids? Right? We keep vaccinating them because they don't inherit the ability to fight the disease that their parents built up through their vaccines. That's why we have to keep doing it. What we do is at some point we eradicate so much of it that we're comfortable getting rid of the vaccine, like polio. Right? We pretty much got rid of polio, so we said we don't need to make the effort of giving everyone a polio vaccine anymore because it doesn't really exist much anymore. Right? So it's more of a decision based upon the world environment doesn't have polio, so we don't need it anymore.
Right.
It's not that the people are resistant to it anymore.
Yeah. They're just not exposed to that. I just wonder it doesn't really matter, because politically you could never make that argument. You could never say that, well, we're going to wipe out half the people on this disease and we're okay with that. I mean, that would never fly, right? So that'd be like political suicide to state that.
Well, and apparently, so Ebola has a 25 to 90% fatality rate.
That's a wide range, man.
Yeah.
Why
I don't know if you build immunity to that, because that's an infection, right? Rabies has a 100% fatality rate. Untreated.
Okay, so we definitely need a rabies vaccine. Undoubtedly, the rabies is important. Actually.
I don't know what Marburg disease is.
Yeah.
But So I'm assuming you can get Ebola multiple times.
Well, then my argument breaks down at that particular. Good thing I'm not a virologist or whatever, because I would make
But
people.
the idea, yeah, you can get. Oh, it says it's rare, but you can get Ebola more than once. Okay,
Okay.
so then maybe that's in there. You're in the same boat. But the idea is most of these things happen to a human body, at least every human body can experience it at least once, which
Yeah.
is the argument for a vaccine.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
But I think that's the argument against inbreeding, right? Which is very common back in the old times.
Inbreeding reinforced genetic combinations that had problems, right? So
Yeah, because you
hemophilia was a
wanted this
common
wide
one.
range. So if something
Yeah.
came along, it's not going to kill everybody. Some
So
people
I
are.
think a lot of European royalty had hemophilia was inbred into them, so they bled a lot when they got hurt.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Then there's certain deficiencies and the like. So when you've got a limited gene pool, your combinations of genes are kind of not too great.
Which is interesting because, like, when I went to these space shows, we're gonna go colonize some other planet or something like that. It's interesting that they say sometimes there's as few as like 100 people or maybe even 30 people. You can have a wide enough gene pool that you're not going to be exposed to any major problem. I wonder if that's true or if that's just
I
science.
heard in one book, so it's a science fiction book, but
Yeah,
science
yeah.
fiction anymore has a lot of does have a lot of research into it. That it was 50 pairs of people you would need.
Oh my gosh! So like a radically small number, which is so interesting.
If you pick the right 50 pairs to
Yeah,
begin with. I
it's gotta be
mean,
the right people.
obviously, but that
Yeah,
would be enough variety that you could avoid a lot of the genetic problems. Is what
that's
I don't know.
fascinating.
That was the number that I heard, and
Yeah,
so
but I heard the same
it's
thing,
still.
like a
But
surprisingly small sample size.
so the idea of like those apocalypse stories where you're the last man and woman on Earth are going to repopulate the Earth. Yeah, well then you're going to have genetic problems. So
We're gonna have problems. Yeah. Oh, by
they're
the way,
all everyone's going to have I don't know, cleft palates or I don't know. They're all going to be left-handed.
this is Dudley. This is the eater right here. Come here. Come say hi, Dudley. This is Dudley. Say hi to the camera. This is the eater. This
Ooh, can you
dude
see? Ooh.
just eats like crazy. Actually, he's an eater, man. So, anyway, I just want to
Is he
introduce.
the loud one?
Oh, God, just nonstop. Actually, he just won't stop. I don't know if that comes through on the microphone or not. I don't know.
Sometimes I hear a meow in the background.
He just drives me crazy. He's such a needy cat. He just needs constant attention all the time, or else he just gets crazy. So, all right, Chris, are we ready to wrap this thing up, or
I think we're ready to wrap up. I got to go get my knee X-rayed.
Oh, you're still having trouble with your knee?
So since I went to the doctor this week, I just mentioned that that it gives me I'll work it and it'll takes me 3 or 4 days for it to heal, and it just might be normal. I think this level of pain is normal given the condition of my knee, but they're gonna look at it and see if there's anything in there. So
Are you getting are you going to like physical therapy or something so you actually do the right
I was doing
things?
that last year for my back actually, and my knee got stronger, and my knee is stronger now than it has been before. I can squat down almost till I get my butt to the ground, which is something that
Oh,
I can't say I've ever done in the last 20 years. So
okay.
I've got movement in it. It's just what I find is when I'm when I'm standing around, like I'm at Disneyland or someplace like that where you're standing a lot, I get it gets very painful to bend the knee. So I need to consistently sit and bend and squat and do various things to keep the blood flow there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's anything I can do about that. At the end of the day, I think it just might be the way life is. But otherwise, I mean, I've got pretty good motion on it. It's not like but when it gets stiff and sore, then I complain. So
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. It just seems as we get older, there's just certain just aches and pains, and sometimes I wonder, is that just how it's supposed to be, or is that just because we're eating bad food that causes inflammation? Are you supposed to be sore when you get older? I know it's common, but is that the only choice you have? I just
yeah,
wonder.
I think so. Personally, I think that's just the way it is.
I think so.
Right?
Yeah.
If you could remain active and strong at that age, across the board, I'm sure there's individuals who will always be that way. Then I think I assume that the warriors and tribes would have been in their 70s and still out there fighting, which I think would be
I
a
think so.
rarity, and that would be the uncommon thing.
Yeah, that's one thing that Robert Kennedy or whatever. I mean, that dude's 70 years old with a six pack. I mean, you don't see that every day, you know. He must. I wonder if he's juicing. Do you think he's like supplementing with some other stuff, or do you think he's all natural?
Methylene blue, man.
Oh, come on, methylene blue doesn't give you a six pack like that. There's
No, but what I'm saying is, when I go down those rabbit holes of nutrition, he's the one who got caught using methylene blue, and so it became a thing. So now I'm trying it. I don't know. It has some impact. I can't say what cognitive impact. I don't know offhand.
How's that working? I've been somewhat thinking about trying that. I don't know. When I go read the risk factors, and there's so many. I'm like, I don't know. You know.
Well, if you take it at the levels they're talking about, yeah, I mean, and medically in the tests they've done, they're giving it in the milligrams per grams per body weight, and
Yeah.
and so they recommend 10 milligrams a day, and I'm taking like 1 milligram a day.
Oh, so you're way okay. Okay.
They're saying like 20 drops of this, and this is not even medical. Medical level is grams per day, and I just take like 2 drops of that. And if I do that 10 drops, the first time I tried the full 20 drops or whatever they said to do, and I told you the next day I had a headache.
Okay. So too much. Yeah.
So yeah. And then other weird things like you're supposed to eat liver to get whatever the minerals or something that your body can't get. So I went and I made liver powder.
Oh.
I bought chicken liver. I cooked it in the oven with some salt and pepper. Then I dehydrated it in the dehydrator and popped it in the food processor. And so I can add a scoop of this to my protein shake or whatever else I want.
Oh, why don't you just eat the liver? I mean, why do you powderize it up? Do you lose something in that?
Because then I've got to have liver on hand available in the fridge all the time. So I really, I know powders are a form of processed food, which I don't like, but they're so much more convenient.
Yeah, but that's a different level of processing, I think, than you're not pumping it full of a million chemicals.
No. This is just physical processing. It's nothing chemical or anything like that.
So what is the difference? So if you ate like, I don't know what it is. Let's say you eat 1 unit of liver, chicken liver, right? And then you take and process that 1 unit. Are you getting the same results, or are you losing something in that processing?
Well, so this is 2 pounds, fits into a 1 pound jar. But the raw material is the same. I don't know if you're going to be losing much, because most of everything you're losing is liquid. It's just water.
So drying out.
I think the question to you is, would the bioavailability of the nutrients change?
Yeah. Is it effective? Right? Yeah, whatever.
I don't rightly know. I'm assuming not that much, but there's got to be some change. Just like dried herbs aren't as good as fresh herbs, I'm assuming there's some level of impact. But I'm going for ease of use is kind of what this is.
See, that's a great example of the fact that, let's assume it's even half as efficient. I don't know, I'm just throwing a number. I have no idea. But still, if you're not going to do the other thing, it's better to get half of something than 0 of something. So
yeah, I don't want to eat liver. This actually, and this has a very mild smell compared to liver. Yeah. Although I got to say, my wife was not happy with it, and I was dehydrating it in the house. But honestly, I put that into my shake, and there's a very mild liver flavor, but it's not like liver. It's not like when you're eating liver and onions as a kid.
But I hear liver has just so many nutrients packed in it. I mean, it's just such an amazing food. So
I think there's too many variables to have here for me to figure out what's really working and what's not, which is why I really want the day when I can just feed all my data in and get some kind of an output.
Well, until then, you just got to do it like trial and error, and then how long does it take to load? And there's so many. I'm sure there's a way to get at least close to the answer.
I told you that one day that I ate like a pound of chicken breast for lunch.
Yeah.
I wasn't hungry for a whole day after that.
Chicken breast, which means very little fat in it, so it's mostly just a ton of protein then.
Yeah, so it was organic chicken breast. It was on sale, so I bought it. And it was like strips. It was designed to make chicken fingers or whatever out of it.
How much protein is it? What's in it? How much protein? How many grams of protein in a pound?
I don't know, 20 grams in a 4-ounce serving or something like that. I don't know.
So that means 20. That means that's only 80 grams in a whole pound.
38 grams in 1 cup. So yeah, so 20 grams. Yeah. So basically 2 cups would be a pound. So.
Well, is that a volume measurement or is that a weight measurement?
Well, let's do 100 grams. And 100 grams, so you need 454 is what you need grams, right? So 4.5. 27 times 4.5. So 100, 130?
There's only
120 something?
grams in a pound of chicken?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right. Hang on, I'm gonna look this up.
123 grams in a pound of chicken.
Yeah, I get 123. So they're wanting you to eat. I mean, depending on who you listen to, it ranges from 0.8 grams per pound of body to 1.2.
Yeah, so that would be roughly what, 60% to 2/3 of what I need for the day. I actually ordered some protein powder simply because I can't get enough protein in by eating meat.
That makes sense. So even if you just go in the center.
Yeah, if I need to eat 160 grams of a day as a goal, that means a whole pound of chicken doesn't get me there.
Yeah, right.
I don't think beef is any more dense, is it?
I don't know. I still need to work my macros. I've been sort of lazy because I've been going out.
Beef is less. Beef is 117. So the thing is, meat, I think has like maybe 120 grams per pound.
For just ballparkish, yeah, that's about.
Just ballparkish, which means that if you're trying to get to 240, let's say, that's 2 pounds of meat. That's a lot of meat.
That's a lot of meat. Maybe then I'm under protein. Maybe because I feel like I eat a lot, but maybe I'm not eating enough protein. I mean,
well, especially if you're working out as much as you have been, then maybe what you need to do is get some kind of protein powder out there. Just try it and see, right? You do 1 shake a day, that's adding what, 20 to 30 grams of protein.
Yeah, I've got to really work my next time we meet, Chris. Maybe we can meet in a week or maybe before me. I'm going to commit to having my exact macros down and actually eating on plan instead of just sort of eating when I'm hungry and just sort of wing. I'm just winging it right now.
I am to an extent too. I mean, I've got foods that I eat, but
But I'm not weighing, measuring, and everything.
Oh, no. That I don't want to do that. But anyway, yeah, I have to figure that out. But okay.
Yeah.
Like I said, I need to run and get my knee looked at, so I will.
All right, Chris.
Check with you later. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good. So you're going to stop the recording and then.
Yep.
Awesome. We'll see you, Chris.
All righty. Cool.